All right, let's get it. Drive time Thursday afternoon, 10 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. Scorching hot day outside. It's about 92 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, right outside of our beautiful Broadway media studios. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass, producing the show, booking the show today. We've got a bunch of good guests, a lot of good guests to cover a bunch of different topics because there's a lot going on right now. We have a series in the NBA. We have a legitimate series in the NBA as the Indiana Pacers took Game 3 at home, 116-107 at Gainsbridge Fieldhouse. Nice to only have a one-day gap as Game 4 will be tomorrow. Reminder, you can hear that game on our radio station. We are your home of the NBA Finals. We're also your home of the Battle for Lord Stanley's Cup, which rolls on tonight in Florida, as the Oilers will try to draw even with the Panthers after the Panthers smoked them in Game 3, 6-1. Emirates Bank Arena, Sunrise, Florida, will be the venue, so we'll see if Edmonton can draw this thing even in a Stanley Cup final rematch from a year ago. So a lot to do, some NBA Finals action. We'll talk about what we saw in Game 3. We'll preview Game 4 coming up tomorrow. Oklahoma City still a favorite on the road, but can Indiana actually pull this off? Interesting dynamic between both these two teams as it pertains to the way people were speaking about their chances of winning the championship. The only pushback for Oklahoma City was, and continues to be, at least in my opinion, the fact that this is their first trip to not just the NBA Finals, but it's the first deep playoff run this group has had together. They lost in the second round last year to Dallas. So there's always kind of been this, are they ready type narrative surrounding them, which I think is absolutely fair based off of historical precedent in pro basketball. But on the other side, nobody saw this coming with the Pacers either. It's like neither of these two teams fit the script of a past NBA champ as far as, the lack of deep runs and experience in the postseason together. So we're going to have a very unique champ no matter what. I still am not convinced Indiana can get this done. That might be because I'm a stubborn SOB. Or maybe I just don't like the Pacers. While I very much am enjoying this great basketball city, seeing their team in the NBA Finals, because, Indianapolis and Indiana as a state, big basketball spot with Hoosiers, Larry Bird, the whole deal. So it has been fun to watch Rick Carlisle coach this team up, and Rick probably deserves more credit than he gets from a macro standpoint. If they win a championship, he will be in very, very rarefied air. So we'll talk some NBA Finals on the show today. Trade winds a-blowing in the NBA. Rumors left and right, several involving the Utah Jazz. We'll get to some of those. The New York Knicks were denied. I'm sorry. I don't know why I find this so funny. Since you and I last spoke, the Knicks asked Chicago if they could talk to Billy Donovan. They're like, no, stop calling us, please. So that's that. Leads us to Houston with Ime Udoka, Dallas with Jason Kidd, Minnesota with Chris Finch, Atlanta with Quinn Snyder, and now Chicago with Billy Donovan. The Knicks are 0 for 5. What a joke. But a lot of NBA rumors going on as far as player movement. Several involve the Utah Jazz, as we are also high speed ahead to the NBA draft on June the 25th. A new mock draft from The Athletic today. Interesting name for the Jazz at 5. We'll tell you who that is. And we'll talk some Jazz offseason basketball. Kristen Pulisic was on a podcast today. We did talk about the embarrassing performance of the U.S. men's national team a couple of nights ago. The Gold Cup will get rolling coming up this weekend. Our very own Diego Luna will be a central feature, and we are 1 year away from the World Cup being played in our region. So we'll get to some of that on the program today as well. Off-season NFL stuff with Aaron Rodgers back in camp with several OTAs going on. Some of our local guys trying to make their way and make teams. And, of course, off-season college football news, and we're going to do some of that today on the program, and some college basketball news. We have the Big 12 college basketball scheduled for you. We'll tell you who the Utes are going to play. We've got a couple of different home and homes and then several just one-offs. But we do have the first Big 12 schedule for Alex Jensen's foray into Big 12 play as the new head coach of the University of Utah. So we've got some off-season college football. We've got some off-season NFL. We've got some college basketball to get to. BYU, Utah know their schedule now. Of course, NBA Finals and, of course, Stanley Cup Finals. And, oh, by the way, the U.S. Open is being played right now at Oakmont. This course is bringing a lot of the best golfers in the world to their knees, to no surprise. We will give you an update on the scoreboard. We'll keep you up to date on how our local players are doing. J.J. Spahn carded a 66, which is an insane score, on one of the toughest golf courses in the country during one of the toughest tournaments of the PGA Tour calendar. The weather looks great. There's not a lot of wind. There's a little wind, but it's about 72 degrees, mostly sunny, at Oakmont Country Club in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. So we'll give you an update there as the third major championship in the world of professional golf is going on as we speak. All right, good guest list to cover, well, everything I just unpacked. We'll start with Andy Larson to talk some Utah Jazz, some Jazz draft. We'll do some Jazz off-season. RSL is in action on Saturday against DC. Fun to catch up with Pablo Mastroeni yesterday, so we'll get Andy's take on where we're at with Real Salt Lake. The hippest NBA writer in the country, we'll go live to Indianapolis, where we will find Howard Beck from The Ringer. He'll stop by today, give us his take on Game 3, take on the series. One of our favorites to talk golf, Cam Rogers, just the sweetest kid around. He's a big Third Eye Blind fan, and I don't know why I think that's funny. I just do. So Cam's going to stop by today. And then stay tuned at 4 o'clock as the professor, as I now call him. If you want to learn exactly what House v. NCAA means and what the future of NIL regulations are and whether or not this sports commission, headed by Brian Seeley, will be able to corral everything that he needs to, Matt Brown is the guy to listen to, and he joins us in the 4 o'clock hour. And then we'll get with our guys from Handy and Handy, Garrett and Preston Handy, for a little sports court. We'll go from there on a Thursday afternoon. Happy Thursday to you. You're almost there. It's almost weekend time. Hopefully you're having a good work week, though. So Andy Larson, Howard Beck, Cam Rogers, Matt Brown, Sports Court, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson. Have the Knicks contacted you to see if you'd like to coach their team?
Oh, man. No, not yet.
I'm sorry. I think this is hilarious.
You have to. I mean, there's a certain aspect of being a Knicks fan that kind of forces you to laugh it off, right? This is decades now of similar activities. When I saw Ian Begley, who is a reputable New York reporter, mention the name Mike Woodson yesterday, I just laughed. And I, even kind of respect Mike. It's just, it's another show of the Knicks just kind of doing whatever they want, thinking they can do whatever they want, right? And not really being in touch with reality. And that is the reality of James Dolan. That's the experience you're going to get as a Knicks fan. So it is pretty funny. You'll probably add a few other names to the list. And here's the thing. The Knicks job, coaching as the head coach in the mecca of basketball, is something most guys would want to do. That's not the question. Working for James Dolan is the reason none of these guys are getting interviews or really even giving the opportunity. While you were doing your intro, Brian Rolap was named PGA commissioner, by the way.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so I thought you'd like to hear that.
You're messing around.
No. Adam Schefter reporting with Seth Wickersham. So that's real.
Friend of the program, Brian Rolap?
22 years in the NFL and now PGA commissioner. Interesting.
Okay, I'm going to have to process that during the break because when Roger Goodell is done, Brian would have had that job.
And that's kind of how Adam was reporting it, which is really interesting.
Well, I guess we'll reach out to see if we get him on the show. My guess is now it's going to be really, really difficult. He is a sharp dude.
And if you listen to The Drive, Spence, you'll get seedlings of sports power.
Yes, you will.
It looks like.
That's right. Friend of the program, Brian Rolab, who essentially was Roger Goodell's number 2 and credited with negotiating the current NFL television landscape. LDS dude, BYU guy, wildly impressive, and also a sweet guy as well. So congratulations to Brian Rolap. I've known his wife since I was like 12 years old. Anyway, nobody cares about that. That's a really cool thing. Our first guest today will be Andy Larson. Now, before we get to Andy, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. So here's what you do. It's very easy. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and when you play that first $5 lineup, they're just going to hook you up with $50. Do not even have to win that $5 lineup. The $50 is guaranteed. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to check out. They'll give you $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game all season long. All right, I will tell you what, boys and girls, we have a series on our hands in the NBA Finals, and I am still going to be a little bit stubborn, only because of the historical nature of what Oklahoma City has done all year and what we watched them do to Minnesota, to Denver, and others. And I think on paper, that's still a better basketball team, which leads to the incredible coaching job that Rick Carlisle has pulled off, not just during the NBA Finals, but during the entire playoff run. So a couple things here. We saw a more aggressive Tyrese Halliburton right out of the gates, but we also saw Oklahoma City change up their coverage a little bit. And I'll be interested to see. Mark Daigneault is obviously a sharp guy, but he is now joining the list of coaches that have been outcoached so far by Rick Carlisle. That included the former coach of the Knicks, Tom Thibodeau, for fair. So I'm interested to see what Daigneault does moving forward. So they more or less have gone away from playing their 2 bigs together, but that might be something they need to look at because they're actually plus 10 in a very small, truncated space when Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein are on the floor together, okay? It's something they utilized a lot during the regular season. It's obvious as to why Daigneault decided not to do that because Indiana, quite frankly, since January, when, if we're honest, that's when this stuff started. I keep reminding people as we talk about the series, the 2 best records in the NBA since January 1st belong to these 2 teams. Oklahoma City is 1, but Indiana is 2. They got healthy. Rick changed his rotation, and things just started to click. So they actually been playing high-level basketball, if we're going to be honest, for about 6 months. It doesn't mean anybody saw this coming. And anybody that's going to tell you they did is lying to you. We do exist in an ecosystem, in a business of revisionist historians that never revisit the things they were wrong about and just make things up about things they never really said at the time. Nobody was picking Indiana to win the championship, and let me be clear, I'm still not. Okay, now my pick has been wrong. I picked OKC in 5, and it feels tough to say OKC in 6. But look, for all of the love that Oklahoma City fans were getting about what it's like to play in that building, Indiana fans are right there, too. Last night watching that was a reminder, because I've been in that building, 10 to 15 times, and 6 or 7 times for Nick Pacer playoff games. It is loud. It is intense, and they are right on top of you. But the other thing we talked about yesterday, because I just kind of pushed back on the narrative that this is all on Tyrese Halliburton. I just pushed back on the narrative like he has to go for 30, 35. It's not the type of player he is. And it's unfair to him to put him in that box because on the other side, you have a generational individual offensive superstar player in SGA. But they're different players, and they mean different things to their respective teams. It's like when I watch Tyrese Halliburton play, it's more in the ilk of like a Chris Paul, Steve Nash lead guard situation. If he goes for more than 20, that's gravy. Now, the stats back up that Indiana is extra special. When he does go for more than 20, they are 20-1 all year long. They're now 8-1 in the playoffs. So, of course, it's found money when Tyrese goes for 20+. But what he did last night wasn't just go for 20+. He also had 11 assists and 9 rebounds. He was much better defensively on the individual point of attack than we've seen, quite frankly, because Oklahoma City was very intentional to try to get him in action. And we should pause and say this. Indiana put SGA and put Shea in tremendous defensive actions almost every possession. It was their intent. Now, you can't do it every single time because Oklahoma City has so many great perimeter defensive players that can fight over screens like Lou Dort or Alex Caruso. But Rick Carlisle was very clear about his intent, and that is we are getting switches to make Shea the primary defender at the point of attack. And that's not just because Shea – well, let me rephrase that. Shea is a good defensive player, okay? It makes him a little bit of a unicorn to have such a high-level skill set on both sides of the floor. But Jalen Williams is a better defensive player. Lou Dort is probably the best perimeter defensive player in the NBA right now. And that's not even to mention Alex Caruso, in addition to Cason Wallace, the other two defensive perimeter players that cause people a lot of problems. But it isn't just that you want to put potentially maybe their most vulnerable perimeter defensive player in action. It's also you want to tire him out when he has the ball and they are on offense. They also changed up their coverages on Shea last night. They weren't as aggressive at hedging or blitzing on pick and roll. They would leave the primary defender a few feet back, playing kind of like center field to take away Shea's passing lanes, and then they would blitz him after he started attacking. It took away a lot of his angles and his lanes, and it was a really smart adjustment that we saw in Game 3. And now the adjustment has to flip to the other side to see what Mark Daigneault elects to do. And I do wonder whether or not, I don't know that he puts Hartenstein back in the starting lineup, but they've got to figure something out because at this point, it is safe to say all of us have been wrong about Indiana's capability and capacity to win this thing. They can. They're here, okay? Last thing before we go to break, because back to my original point, I was pushing back a little bit on the narrative that Tyrese has to be Kobe or, quite frankly, SGA, Mike, the players, historically speaking, in NBA playoff basketball that score 30, 35 or more. So in addition to Tyrese needing to do what he did last night, we just needed, if you're an Indiana fan, we needed to see the O.G. Toppins, the T.J. McConnells, the Benedict Matherins, the Ben Shepherds, the Andrew Nemhards, right, the Aaron Nesmiths. We needed to see those other guys actually play the way they played against the New York Knicks. And we saw that last night. McConnell was an irritant because he is, and he's excellent at it. Matherin was next level good, 27 points on 12 shots taken. Shepard gave Rick some good minutes defensively. It was a classic Pascal Siakam game where he was just quietly effective. And Carlisle actually did something in the fourth quarter as well. He sat Siakam until about 5 minutes left and actually gave Halliburton a little bit more rest because the backcourt of McConnell and Matherin were causing OKC a ton of issues, and nobody saw that coming at all. So Rick Carlisle, once again, a masterclass coaching pro basketball. And now we'll see if Mark Daigneault can adjust, what sort of adjustments he can make prior to Game 4 coming up tomorrow, which is 6:30 Mountain Time. Television coverage on ABC, radio coverage right here on ESPN 700. All right, we'll catch a quick break. We'll do some Jazz offseason, some NBA draft, and maybe a little RSL with Andy Larson. On the other side, then it's Howard Beck, it's Cam Rogers, it's Matt Brown, it's Sports Court, it's me, Spence Checketts. It's all you, the great listeners, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. Game 4 of the NBA Finals tomorrow night, 6:30 Mountain Time. Television coverage is ABC. Radio coverage is right here. ESPN 700. We are a few weeks away from the NBA draft, so we have a lot to do with our next guest, who is the very famous, very important Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. Andy, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, man. All right, so can Indiana actually do this? They're up 2-1, and that's great. They get the proverbial Game 3 emotional win at home. Vegas is still favoring OKC. I still lean OKC, but I've been tremendously impressed. Can they actually win the championship, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have to say that they absolutely can. I mean, I probably also am with Vegas and you in that, like, Oklahoma City coming back and winning that series still feels more likely to me. I think they have more talent at the top. You know, obviously they've got the MVP this year. I think they have, obviously one of the best defenses we've seen in recent NBA memory. But it's clear at this point that the Pacers are a real threat to them. You know, like I think they were minus 800 favorites to win the series when it started. And now, you know, it's pretty even. And, you know, I think the Thunder have to be really worried about it. Look, I was incredibly impressed that the Pacers were able to win that game last night, despite the Thunder shooting as well from three-point range as they did, right? Like that the Thunder made almost half their threes. You got Lou Dort making four of them again, and still you weren't able to win that game. I mean, I think it shows that what the Pacers are doing is real, and what the Pacers are doing is really tiring out the Oklahoma City Thunder and make it hard for them to score in the last few minutes of the game.
So now it's time to see what Mark Daigneault has up his sleeve, because I just think Rick has been so incredibly impressive, and this is not a new thing. I mean, obviously that 2011 championship he won with Dallas when they beat the first finals appearance from the Miami Heat, when everybody just assumed Miami was going to run like six straight off after they were able to grab LeBron and Bosh to join up with D. Wade. He coached a really good Pistons team before they ditched him for Larry Brown, and Larry went on to win a championship. But if you're Mark Daigneault, down 2-1, what's the play here? He made a change to his starting lineup to bring Cason Wallace in and sit Isaiah Hartenstein, and it is a very small, truncated space, but they're actually positive in the plus-minus when Hartenstein and Chet actually play together. So what does Mark Daigneault do between now and tomorrow to kind of get this thing back in OKC's kind of wheelhouse here?
You know, I do think playing Hartenstein more makes more sense. I get why you make the starting lineup adjustment going into the NBA Finals. Like, I think, I get what Cason Wallace brings against this Pacers team. And I think, theoretically it does make sense. But I do think, like, you lose a little bit of interior oomph with Hartenstein out off the court as much as he has been. I think, Chet has been, it's funny, I think he had a good start to game 3, and then despite, I think a strong box score line, like, was relatively rough after that. I think you can beat him a little bit on the board. You can, the Miles Turner block of him at the three-point line, and then him deciding to then continue and try to drive again showed a little bit of immaturity, right? And so I think you're looking for a player who can kind of keep things moving and keep the Oklahoma City offense running. I think Isaiah Hartenstein's one of the best short roll passers in the league. I think he's one of the best connecting big men in the league. And I think kind of maybe playing him more gives you a little bit more oomph offensively. I realize that it gives you a little bit more limitation defensively, but I think it's maybe worth it. And then, I think you may have to open up the bench a little bit more. Again, I just do think Oklahoma City was dog tired by the end of that game, and it was closely fought throughout, right? Like, I think it's understandable, but it's clear that their players are maybe not as ready physically as Indiana's are. And so given how good the Oklahoma City bench is, I do think, Daigneault can stay a little bit longer with the bench, do a little bit more substituting, because they have been effective in those bench minutes too.
So I've just continued to push back on the conversation that seems to be surrounding the NBA Finals concerning the two, I'll say, stars for both teams, where SGA on one side, Halliburton on the other. And after Halliburton really didn't wake up until the fourth quarter of Game 2, the conversation turns into he has to be this, he has to be that, he has to score this, he has to score that. And look, the data indicates they're 20-1 throughout the course of the regular season and the playoffs when he goes for more than 20 points. But he doesn't go for more than 20 points very often because that's not who he is. I mean, his career averages are 16, 17 points, 7, 8 assists. And Shea is more of the primary offensive individual option, even though OKC has plenty of guys that could score. When I see Halliburton at his most effective, it is a little Chris Paul-y, it's a little Steve Nash-y. It's not like Jordan or Kobe or, quite frankly, Shea. So when it comes to what Indiana needs night in and night out from Tyrese Halliburton juxtaposed to what OKC asked from Shea, what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like the lazy analysis is, well, he's got to go for 30 or else they're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Hallie, he's not as good in the mid-range as SGA. He's not as good at getting all the way to the basket. He's not quite as good at getting fouled. And so that means more of his scoring has to come from the three-point line. And that can become a little bit coverage dependent. I think if the three's going in or if he's taking a lot of them, and I think he should do this actually. I don't think it's a accident that the Pacers have been this good when he scores that much. I think ultimately it's easy to understand why he can't necessarily get to 20 and 10 every night because that he's not that fully complete as of a player, the elite guards you just mentioned. But I do think him being aggressive and him trying to, because Oklahoma City's defense is, I think, really used to focusing on a player and taking that player out of the game. I think they do that, again, as well as any defense, maybe in league history. I think he has to continue to push the issue throughout the game, and that's really tiring. And clearly, in game 2, he was also working through some sort of physical thing, right? Limped after the press conference, looked a lot better in game 3. So, Hallie has got to figure out, basically how to do it throughout the course of the game, like he did in game 3, and made it look really good. Game 1, frankly, he was there at the end, but not through most of the game. And I think it's fair to say that the Pacers kind of stole it. So, I think the best version of the Pacers has an aggressive Halliburton, but one of the brilliant things about him, maybe the brilliant thing about him, is that he is so good at getting his teammates involved up the court early, quickly in possessions, in situations where they can uniquely succeed, whether that's Pascal Siakam or Ben Mathurin or whoever. So that can stop because, without Halliburton, I don't think that the rest of the Pacers offense is anywhere near as good because of that unique talent he has.
Get your thoughts on something I've been debating with a few of my NBA guests. It's interesting to consider that both these teams actually parlayed Paul George into their franchise cornerstones. In a roundabout way, Indiana trades Paul George for Domo Sabonis, and then they trade Domo for Halliburton, and then in a very, very much more direct way, OKC receives SGA, a bunch of picks, one that turned into Jalen. Did the Jazz get enough for Mitchell? Did the Jazz get enough for Donovan? And only time will tell. There's still picks that have to convey. And there's probably an argument to be made that peak Paul George was thought of maybe in a different way that Donovan is. But just for the sake of the conversation with these two teams in the finals and us being in Salt Lake City, did the Jazz get enough for their superstar after they traded him?
I mean, I think so. I don't think you can really fairly make that complaint, right? If you look at kind of the pick and caliber prospect that Sabonis was and pick and caliber prospect that, Walker Kessler was, pick and caliber prospect that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was, I think the Jazz clearly went for picks in return, but there was no way for them to get a knowingly great superstar up and coming. I think they probably got they did the best that they could, right? Even the Donovan and Rudy trades were really well documented in terms of what they could realistically get back, right? And there is no answer out there. There's no world where they are getting a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a Domantas Sabonis, or a Tyrese Halliburton, right? I don't think that was ever on the table for them to get a caliber of player, a young player like that back. So, look, I think you can have plenty of complaints about the Jazz's front office, and I have certainly had those on the show and elsewhere. But to me, what they got back in the Donovan and Rudy trades is, I think it's well there.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move off the finals conversation. Did you have much interaction with Johnny Bryant while he was here with the Jazz?
No, not a ton. I believe he covered maybe his coach one summer league, and you just chat with guys from time to time. But I wouldn't say like I was particularly close to him.
Okay, well, the New York Knicks clearly have no contingency plan in place after firing the coach that took them to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years and won back-to-back 50-win seasons back-to-back for the first time since the mid-'90s. So they elect to fire Tom Thibodeau, which, of course, is well documented, and now they're 0 for 5 at seeking permission to interview coaches that already work for other teams. And there are people out there that believe at some point, whether they like it or not, they just might land on Johnny Bryant. Your thoughts on what sort of head coach he could make based off of what you know about him?
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see. I mean, doesn't have head coaching experience, right? Like, started as Paul Millsap's personal trainer, right? Like, and kind of worked his way up in the world. It's, I think I feel much more confident about him in the player development space than I do about X's and O's and leading a team. I think there were when he did rise through the Jazz, there were some people who were jealous to some degree. I don't know if jealous is the right word, but there were some questions about like how he was moving up so quickly, and whether or not that was deserved. And that being said, he's also now found this role on 2 other NBA teams, right? So I don't know that that's necessarily fair. It's hard to know how a head coach will do in their first go around at it. To me, like, maybe does not have super head coach personality compared to a lot of the other head coaches I interview before and after every game. And I've talked to every NBA head coach in the league at this point. But I'm not sure that it wouldn't work either. I just truly don't know. If I were the New York Knicks, I'd probably go in the Mike Malone direction rather than in the Johnny Bryant direction. But yeah, that's kind of it has been interesting to see them just fire Tom Thibodeau with no plan at all in place to actually get a guy.
Okay, Andy, over the past week, I've read Sarah Todd, our friend from the D News. I've heard Zach Lowe, and I've heard Ben Simmons all say the Jazz are actively taking calls on Markkanen and Kessler. Does that mean anything is going to happen? Absolutely not. And of the 1,000 NBA rumors you'll hear over the next few weeks, 5 will happen. That's just kind of how this goes. But you're plugged in over there. So give me your understanding about that dynamic. The Jazz may be taking calls on those 2 players who I think are the only 2 good players on the roster as of now. Obviously, a lot of youth there, too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they're also taking calls. Like, I think people still think John Collins is a good player. I still think people think Colin Sexton's a good player. I don't think that necessarily going to get a lot of value for those guys given the 1 year and a decent amount of money left on their contracts. But yeah, it's clearly Markkanen and Kessler who have the positive trade values that if you're looking to change the direction of the franchise moving forward, those would be the guys that you trade. And so, yes, I do think it's fair to say they're listening to trade to offers on those guys. Kind of the vibe around the league is that they are going to be like the asking price has been out of everyone's range, right? Like that they are asking for the world for those guys, So like, the Lakers and Walker Kessler is a good example. Like that's a real thing. The Lakers are extremely interested in trading for Walker Kessler. They would be willing to give up multiple first-round picks. They would be willing to give up matching salary. The question is, do they have enough to offer to get Walker Kessler, right? Like they tried to trade for Mark Williams, then found the health issue, canceled that trade, and have looked at Walker as a replacement there. It's just kind of whether or not it makes sense for them to offer the very most that they can, right? And to this point, obviously a deal has not been done. I don't know if the Lakers will increase their offer, but that is kind of the vibe. Is that like, hey, and ditto with the Markkanen conversation. I know that there are teams around the league who are interested in acquiring Lauri Markkanen. I think generally they have viewed him as kind of a neutral value asset at this point because of the big contract he has remaining, and frankly, the kind of not as good year he had last year, where he was, in my view, just trying new stuff as the team was tanking, right? Like he was trying to expand his game. I don't think it worked. I think you could kind of plug and play him back in a competitive situation, and he's a near all-star caliber player again. But teams around the league see him as a potential addition they could get on the cheap, and the Jazz obviously see him as kind of the best player on their team, the only thing that they've got going for them. So in general, that's what I would describe it right now as like the asking price apparently remains high on those guys.
All right. So does that say anything to you at all about what next season may look like? I mean, again, we should just continue to reiterate there's a big gap between taking calls and making trades. Does it feel like the motivation is to add these 2 first-round picks and maybe even the 2 second-round picks to the grip of young players, and then just say, okay, you guys are in, and then, the Austin Ainge assertion that they won't be tanking, and that's a way they can actually try to play hard without winning games? Does it feel like that's maybe where we're headed?
I think that's one of the potential paths. I think another one is as teams strike out for other players, so everyone's focused on the Giannis situation. And, I think there are a couple other situations around the league like that. If once you strike out on those guys, let's say, one team gets Giannis, other teams are going to be looking for upgrades. So, I still think, Dallas, Colin Sexton in Dallas makes a lot of sense. And maybe there's, they, after giving up, getting a better point guard to replace Kyrie Irving next year in Dallas, they decide Colin Sexton's that guy. I could totally see that. Maybe San Antonio can't get Giannis and thinks Larry Markkanen's a good fit next to Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper. Maybe that makes sense. I think there are a bunch of different ways that this could go. I do think it's going to take some time to sort it out. And then you're right, the default position and always kind of the most likely one is that nothing happens. And in the end, the Jazz decide they don't like, most of the trade offers, and maybe only one of the veterans is gone as we enter next year.
All right, moving over to the draft now. We revisit this every week, and it's interesting to watch some of these mocks come out and see some of the changes. And look, who knows how much of this is real, how much of it is a smokescreen, but guys like Sam Vecini and Jonathan Givony, et cetera, do a good job. And it feels like Con Knippel's name continues to be not just attached to the Jazz at 5, but maybe even higher, which is kind of catching me off guard. So as we sit here today, just a few weeks out, what are your thoughts on the names that could be there at 5 and any intel on who the Jazz like right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reaction to what's happening in the NBA playoffs and in general and in the basketball world over the last couple of years. With the success of just guys who can connect to pass, defend, and shoot, those players might be more important than the go get a bucket guys, right? This is a crazy comparison that I'm not sure anybody makes a couple of years ago, but would you rather have Brandon Ingram or Alex Caruso? And I know Alex Caruso comes off the bench and is just a good defender, as obviously a great defender, but it does so many things for your team that help you win, whereas Brandon Ingram really wants to take shots, right? And certainly can do more than that. I don't really mean to denigrate Brandon Ingram as a player, but in the end, maybe it's for a reason that his teams haven't won anything. And I think NBA teams are getting more and more thoughtful about where their shot selection comes from and those kind of things. And so, obviously the comparison I'm trying to make is Ace Bailey versus Con Knippel, right? If you have Ace Bailey who it takes a gazillion mid-range shots and is really good at it, but doesn't do a whole lot else, has a negative assist to turnover ratio, and then is telling you in interviews that he wants to get better at taking more shots rather than wants to get better at defense and passing the ball and all kind of the other stuff. And then on the other hand, you have Con Knippel who is just going to be a valuable role player, right? He's going to be a tougher Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's going to be a shorter Joe Ingles. He's just going to be kind of a dog out there. Which direction do you go? And so I get why teams are leaning in the Con Knippel direction. Then also, frankly, the analytics is a part of this, and the analytical models do seem to like Con Knippel more than Ace Bailey because of those issues. And so, yeah, I kind of understand why it's going in that direction. Now, from a Jazz point of view, do the Jazz need a role player to put around their other guys? Not really, because they don't have the other guys to speak of, right? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But on the other hand, Austin Ames said he wants tough, hard-nosed defenders who know how to play the game the right way. And frankly, that's probably more Concanipple than it is Ace Bailey right now. So like, it's a really interesting conversation, I think. I'd probably, I like Concanipple. I think I would put him over Jeremiah Fears. I think I have the conversation about him over Ace Bailey. I still probably lean a VJ Edgecombe if I'm going for toughness and defense. But yeah, I get where NBA GMs are coming from. I do.
The other piece of information that seems to be out there, and again, I can't corroborate any of it, is San Antonio may not be keen on Dylan Harper at 2. If that's the case, do the Jazz look to kick the tires and see, if there's a way to get up there as high as they need to take Dylan Harper? And what do you make of the potential of maybe the Spurs not being sold on the player that everybody thought was consensus number 2?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, again, the analytical models have not loved him at number 2 in the same way that, I think the scouts have. I do think, like, he is going to be a very good NBA player. I do think that, like, his ceiling is not that of, like, a first or second team All-NBA guy, but I do think he's pretty clearly the second best player in this prospect pool. Analytic models have him more in the 4th or 5th range, but I see why the Spurs, and especially given that they have De'Aaron Fox and the reigning Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle, like, why they would kick the tires on moving him. I think if there is, I think the Jazz would absolutely make that offer of Lauri Markkanen for number 2 for Dylan Harper. I think that's an offer that the Jazz would make. I think, there's some pretty logical salary ballast that could go back in the Jazz's direction. Keldon Johnson, say. And that deal could work out. It's just kind of whether that's the best deal for the San Antonio Spurs. And that depends on, can you get Giannis with the number 2 pick instead? I think if the Bucks do decide to trade Giannis, that's a better option for them. So, yeah, it is certainly interesting. I do think this is more up in the air. I think Dylan Harper is going number 2 no matter what, but which team takes him is a real question.
All right, a couple of minutes left. We'll do a little soccer here. And obviously the Gold Cup gets going this weekend. The U.S. men's national team got their doors blown off. 4 goals in like 26 minutes or whatever it was. I thought Diego showed pretty well in the second half. But on a scale of 1 to Alexi Lalas shouting on TV about tariffs and the danger of the World Cup being 1 year away, where are you at as far as you're concerned with the current form of the U.S. men's national team?
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely concerning. It's like 8 or 9. I don't know that I have the energy to shout about it just because I don't know what my expectations were that different, right? Like, they don't have talent. They don't have talent in a lot of important positions right now, right? Like, they're really weak at goalkeeper. They're weak, I think, along the back line, in my view. And then if you don't have Christian Pulisic playing and you're limited, you didn't bring in your best forward and Mulligan probably either, like, this is not a good Gold Cup roster, then this is probably what happens, right? Like, as much as I love Diego Luna, like, and I think he should probably start on this iteration of this U.S. men's national team, like, he's not one of the 100 best players in the world, right? Like, it's not even close. So, I do just think, like, this generation of U.S. talent has a little bit fizzled out besides Pulisic. Gio Reyna is clearly is struggling for minutes everywhere, on a club team as well. So anyway, I just don't think that they are that good. And so expectations should be really low going into the World Cup next year. I think Poch, as a Tottenham fan, like, love the guy as a coach. I think there are real questions as, like, whether that was lightning in the bottle in kind of a Jason Kreis RSL sort of way, or if it was whether his pressing system can continue to work, whether his overall mentality can continue to work in 2025. Clearly, it has not yet worked for the U.S. national team. They look kind of like just lost, like they don't know what to do at this point.
Does the recent run and the 10 matches under Pochettino, where they're 5-5 and they've lost 4 straight, does it say anything about the job Greg Berhalter may have done and whether or not maybe folks miscalculated on that?
I mean, Greg was to me what we thought he was, which is just like an extremely pragmatic coach who never tried to go for too much. But now I think we're learning maybe there wasn't that much to go for. That more ambition with this U.S. team would not necessarily have resulted in better performances. Like, that being said, I also understand if you're the people in charge of the national team, if you trying to go for more, trying to establish a culture of, hey, instead of just, trying to eke out 0-0 draws against Wales or whatever, we're going to try to build a program. And I think just because this is failing right now, I don't necessarily disagree that that's a good idea to try to build something that wants to be more rather than, I think Berhalter probably, did a good job of getting the most out of the lineups that he had. But, I do think that there's reason that U.S. soccer should dream bigger and should go for coaches like Pochettino, even if this particular one doesn't work out.
All right, Andy, last thing I'll set you loose. Nick Raimondo night coming up on Saturday. It is DC United at 7:30. Only 2 games this month for RSL, and I don't know if that's good or bad. They badly need points, but they're not very good at soccer right now. Pablo was on the show yesterday and broke the news that we may see one Johnny Russell in the starting lineup coming up on Saturday. Diogo is back in the good graces. I still don't know how they're going to score goals, which, let me check the math, you need to do to win in soccer. Just kicking the tires, man. Where are you at? What's your confidence? DC is not very good, but, neither is RSL. So your thoughts on what we could see on Saturday and moving forward for our little old soccer club?
Yeah, I mean, look, DC lost 7-1 against the Chicago Fire last week, right? Like, it is a tire fire over there. They are playing incredible. It's bad soccer. If they lose to the Galaxy and DC in consecutive games, like, oh my goodness, it's tough to wear an RSL jersey, man. Like, it's hard to represent the club around town when it is that bleak. So I need a more positive performance from the guys. I know, again, Diego Luna's not going to be there. It's going to be a Johnny Russell lineup. And look, I believe there's a reason Johnny Russell was an unsigned free agent, and it wasn't because of his abundance of youth at age 35. But you put out the best you can, and you do have an opportunity to win a game at home against a team that also has no idea what it's doing right now. So I'll be there, and it's cool. Nick Raimondo night, I think that's a cool kind of distraction from what we're going to see on the field. But it does remain bleak unless RSL can get a big kind of statement win here and try to turn things around.
All right, buddy. Thanks for the time. Have a great week and weekend, and we'll see you soon, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thanks, man.
Andy Larson covers the Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune. At Andy B. Larson on Twitter is where you find him. Always appreciate his time. We will catch a quick break. The hippest rider in the NBA will join us next. Howard Beck, Cam Rogers, Matt Brown, Sports Court, busy Thursday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Do a little U.S. Open today. Cam Rogers is going to stop by. College football with Matt Brown, 4 o'clock hour. Sports Court, handy and handy after that, 5 o'clock hour of the show. Will come your way following those interviews. But joining us now to start the 3 o'clock hour of the program, the great Howard Beck from The Ringer on a Thursday. Howard, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Happy Thursday, Spence. How are you?
I'm well. Do we find you in lovely Indianapolis, Indiana currently?
You do.
Not a guy. Okay. I'll tell you what, on television, that building looked insane. As a guy that was there, what was the atmosphere like last night?
Really great. It's funny because I was having this conversation with someone, a couple people at the arena earlier today after practice. We were just kind of, chit-chatting about the crowd, the intensity and all that stuff and comparing to Oklahoma. And I will say, this is not a knock on Indy at all. Like, it was super loud, and I think it was still like slightly less loud than Oklahoma at its peak because the Thunder crowd is just incredible, man. Like, it just never lets up. It's ear splitting. And listen, I was at a bunch of playoff games at Madison Square Garden this spring, and it's always loud at the Garden. Even in bad times, it's always loud at the Garden. I don't think that anybody can, like, for my limited movement around the league the last couple of years, because I don't travel nearly as much as I used to, I think Oklahoma is the loudest arena. And it's the one place, like, I walk out of it thinking, like, I don't know if my hearing might be damaged, right? Like, maybe I should have worn earplugs. So, but the Pacers fans last night, like, dished it out just as well. Maybe not the same decibel level, but it was raucous there. And, like, they're just, the Pacers are every turn are surprising everybody. And, obviously they're related here.
Since you brought up Madison Square Garden, Howard, penny for your thoughts. Bit of a non sequitur. Yeah. We'll get back to the finals, of course.
Yeah.
But look, like, my whole thing, A, was like, don't fire him. But B, if you do, you better have a contingency in place. Ime Udoka, Jason Kidd, Chris Finch, Quinn Snyder, Billy Donovan, 0 for 5. I mean, you can't, like, this is truth is stranger than fiction stuff with this moron who owns the team. So give me your thoughts on what they're doing, and who do you think ultimately gets that job?
It's becoming like performance art. I said this last night on Blue Sky, where, like, I'm wondering if they're just are the Knicks trolling us, the audience? Are they trolling their own owner? Is the front office trolling Dolan for being the one who probably, arguably, is the one who fired Tibbs? Like, maybe over some front office objections? Like, what is going on here? Listen, like, you and I collectively have seen a lot of stuff at the Garden, a lot of weird things, a lot of things that have not happened anywhere else. But I've been doing this for 28 years covering the league, and I've never seen a team be shot down. What are we up to? 4, 5? 5 teams? Yep. 5 teams. I don't understand this. Forget the whole Tibbs thing for a minute. Forget whether or not they should have had somebody lined up. If you're going to fire a coach with that resume, you better have a better one in mind, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine. Even if this has just been like your Garden variety average, we fired a coach and we need to hire a replacement and we're doing our due diligence. I don't recall anybody's due diligence involving trying to pry loose 5 different coaches who are already under contract and being turned down by them. It doesn't look great on a number of levels. It starts to feel kind of comical and desperate. They're being mocked by Charles Barkley. They're being mocked by Kevin Garnett. So that, after years of building their esteem back up, building their respectability back up, they're now starting to look like the weird old Knicks of just flailing around. So it's a bad look in that regard. The other thing is, like, coaches aren't let out of their contracts very often in this league. Like, it happened with Doc Rivers once upon a time, going from Boston to the Clippers. And there was another one within the last, like, 7-8 years. Who am I thinking of? But Jason Kidd went to the Bucks from the Nets with some draft compensation. But it just doesn't happen very often. It's like a once every 7 to 10 years kind of thing. And to think that you're just going to, like, start to pry loose every coach who you have an interest in, only to be shot down, it just looks bad. And then eventually you're going to hire somebody. Like, let's say it's Taylor Jenkins or Mike Brown. And one of the questions at the press conference is going to be, hey, Mike, all due respect. Hey, Taylor, all due respect, but there were reports that the Knicks tried to get Jason Kidd, Chris Finch, Ime Udoka, on and on and on first. Like when you finally settle on a coach, it's going to look like he was like your 10th choice. And there's some really good coaches available right now who are not under contract, who you don't have to get permission for. Like, what are you doing? I'm absolutely baffled by it. I have no good explanation for it.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist. I mean, outside of the idiot who owns the team, because this is the deal with him and has been for 25 freaking years. Somebody I trust back there sent me a text earlier that said Mike Brown's getting the job. And if he does, that's just kind of like, okay, like, I don't know that Mike's a bad coach. Obviously he's had stops in multiple places that have had mixed results. But if it is Mike Brown, what's the reaction to Knick fans waiting to see who's next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try to predict how fans are going to react to a hypothetical because we just don't know. I don't know who it's going to be at this stage. Mike Brown's done some really good work. Mike Brown did not deserve to be fired by the Sacramento Kings.
Sure, yeah.
Taylor Jenkins, I thought, did a great job with Memphis, and I understand in that case. Like I had heard some things about relations with the locker room, blah blah blah, and like he's a little like Tibbs, a little old school. Like and after a while, you might wear out. Your voice might wear on your players. Like that happens, and I think Michael Malone had some of that too in Denver. But you get a new locker room and guys who haven't heard you before. And you get a fresh start. And like I think Taylor Jenkins, Mike Brown could both be great for the Knicks. Michael Malone could too, but I just don't think that they're going to go down that road, considering that Malone's issues with the Nuggets front office are very parallel to things I've heard about Tibbs and the front office. So there are good options. The good news is for the Knicks, there are good options. And there are good options who are free agents and that you don't need permission for, and we'll see where it goes.
All right, back to the finals. Let's see. So for game 3, we'll get to the Halliburton stuff in a minute, the piece that you wrote, which was very good because it always is. But I'm just going to ask you, 30,000-foot view, what were the main differences between game 3 and game 2?
It's like these are like little microscopic things at this stage. Like the Thunder just didn't look as sharp for whatever reason last night. And I know that they're a team that likes to play at pace also, but I do wonder if the Pacers are starting to wear them down because the Pacers just love to fly around, not just up and down the court, but they're going to move the ball a ton within the half court, and you have to expend a lot of energy to keep catching up to the ball. And so I just wonder if there's a little bit of that. I don't know that there's any grand conclusion to draw from last night's game. I just think that the Pacers continually show us that there is a lot of fight there and a lot of dimensions to their offense because, they don't necessarily have dominant individual scorers. They attack as a unit, and it's a very challenging thing to deal with night in, night out.
What stands out most about Rick Carlisle's coaching job throughout the course of not just this finals run, but throughout the course of the postseason? And then, quite frankly, if we go back to January, these are the two best teams in the league since January. OKC is 1, Indiana's 2. And Rick, won a really odd championship in 2011 with the Mavs against the Heat. And I don't think very many people thought he was going to do that. He was doing a good job with the Pistons before they decided to get rid of him and bring in Larry Brown. So it's not like this is the first time that we've opened our eyes that he can really coach, but this has been a masterclass. What stands out most about his approach, his communication, whatever it is to you?
A lot of it's just his evolution. I think he was always regarded as kind of, old school kind of controlling coach. And, he really empowered Jason Kidd quite a bit back in the day with the Mavericks. And in this case, like he's running an offense now that I think there's some echoes of the 2000 or mid to late 2000 Phoenix Suns, where Halliburton is kind of like Steve Nash, a version of where, they're going to fly up the court. He's going to move the ball quickly, just as Nash did. It's going to move around. There's a lot of improvisation to it. These are not, a lot of set play calls. And I think Rick, as a guy who, obviously has been at this for decades, I think he's given up a lot of control over time and just trusted his players and especially his point guards, Kidd in Dallas, Tyrese Halliburton now, Luka in Dallas, I know that things didn't end well with the two of them, per the reporting at the time. But I think he's learned to just really adapt to his players and to this generation of players.
So are you willing to say that you think Indiana can win the championship? I mean, Vegas still favors OKC. I, like most of the free world, picked OKC in 5. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And while I'll continue to say the same thing to me at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I will never cheer for the Indiana Pacers, but I'm so wildly impressed at their ability to continue to find ways to get this thing done. But do you think they can actually do it? Can they get 2 more wins and win the championship?
Yeah, I don't think we should doubt that now.
Yeah.
I mean, they stole game 1 with one of their wild flurries, right? Like, we're just, we're never going away. We're going to stay in it, and wait for Halliburton to hit a miracle shot. And he's done it so many times this postseason. But you walk away from that game thinking, wow, like they really truly stole one. They get thumped in game 2, which is kind of what everybody expected. And then they come home, and I think for most of us who have just seen a talent gap between these teams, figured, okay, Thunder will take back home court in game 3. They'll win the road game, take back home court advantage, and things will start to go more to form. And the Thunder in 5 will still be on the table, as all of us had predicted. That was it was a definitive win last night, right? Like, they didn't thump them. It wasn't a rout or anything, but it was a convincing victory for the Pacers. And at this point, it's at 2-1 with another home game coming up tomorrow night. We'd be foolish to dismiss the possibility of the Pacers winning this series. That said, if the Thunder win tomorrow night, now it's 2-2. They've taken back home court advantage. It becomes a best of 3 series with 2 of the 3 in Oklahoma. The Pacers clearly can win anywhere. They've won road games, important road games, every round. But I do think a Thunder win tomorrow, depending on how convincing of a win it is, will probably cause everybody to shift back toward them again if they weren't already. And we're always prisoners of the moment. We always overreact to the last thing we saw.
For sure. Now, you wrote about Halliburton and the discussions and narratives surrounding him, quite frankly, all postseason long have been a little bit exhausting. And you pointed out the Nash comparison. He's just more Nash or Chris Paul than he is Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or, quite frankly, SGA, who, as Rick said after game 2, you can just kind of mark in his 30, 34 or whatever. Last night, was it just more a concerted effort from him right out of the gates? Was it different coverage from OKC? And then your thoughts on what he means to Indiana that's just different than what SGA means to OKC. I understand the comp because they're the 2 stars on both sides, but I just think it's a failure to see the forest through the trees and a misunderstanding of what Halliburton means to them juxtaposed to what SGA means to OKC, because as you pointed out earlier, and Rick said again last night, we need everybody. And last night they got everybody, but certainly Tyrese is the head of the snake.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are not perfect analogies, but, if you had seen Chris Paul dueling James Harden or Chris Paul against Russell Westbrook, and, in their relative primes, and granted there's a little bit of a generation gap there, but they had a lot of overlapping years, you'd see Westbrook putting up these monster numbers, and you'd see Chris Paul going for 14 points and 12 assists or something. And, at a glance, you'd say, well, Westbrook must be the better player. Look at all these numbers he's putting up. But Chris Paul was absolutely the better point guard. And, you could cite Steve Nash or Rajon Rondo or Jason Kidd. There have been plenty of great point guards who control the game with their passing and their intellect, and not so much, and their ability just kind of to bend the defense, but not so much their scoring. And that's Halliburton. And so I think it's hard for people to process, even though we've got all these other kind of versions of this over the years. I think people see a guy like Halliburton, and sometimes the scoring's there and sometimes it's not. And the fact is, look, too, in game 2 when he struggled, it wasn't just that he wasn't scoring. He finished with 17 points, but most of that came in the fourth quarter after the game was out of reach. It's also that his assist to turnover ratio was 6-5, which that's not controlling the game. He's at his best when he is making quick passes, quick decisions, getting his teammates going. And I think he just couldn't quite figure out where to attack, whether through the pass or through the shot in game 2. And last night, it just looked like he found some gaps and took advantage of the way the Thunder were playing him. I think, I think the centers were in drop, and I think he was finding like there was that room to operate between the arc and the paint a little bit. Then he made some shots, and I think that got him going as well. It was just I think a really just kind of surgical performance by him, and got pretty damn close to a triple-double.
Now it's on Mark Daigneault as to whether or not he wants to adjust rotations or coverages. And the fact of the matter is Oklahoma City has still outscored Indiana throughout the course of the series, and they've had the lead far more. But ultimately, the scoreboard says what it says in 2-1. And honestly, and I could be completely wrong. I mean, I've been wrong a lot throughout the course of the postseason. I thought Boston would beat New York in 5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But even if they go down 3-1, I'm not sure that I will be convinced that Indiana can do this until it's actually done. But tomorrow night, OKC loses. That just makes this mountain 10 times higher. They are plus, I think, 7 in a very small truncated space when Chet and Hartenstein play together. But that's been something that Daigneault has decided not to do as he's starting Case and Wallace. So as we move over to tomorrow, are you expecting OKC to shift anything, or are they just going to say, look, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing because we've been historically great most of the season?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't like. They already changed, the lineup to start the series, and they've kind of, you could say, stubbornly stuck with it or confidently stuck with it. They haven't played a lot of double big like they did a little bit last night. I don't have the plus minus stuff in front of me. Maybe you do, but it seems like they're more comfortable now in this series going with the single big, and I'm not sure. Do you pull another lever at this stage? Does that seem panicky, or do you feel like, we had game 1 in hand but lost it. We won game 2 definitively. Game 3 was fairly close. We've done fine with our scheme and our rotation. Do we just kind of stick with it and count on a better outcome because we've got the better talent? It seems like Daigneault kind of likes what he's doing right now, and my guess is he would stick with what he's got, with what he's been doing. But I don't know. I don't know.
Last question, and I realize I'm putting the cart way ahead of the horse. Okay, I want to let you know that I know what I'm about to do before I'm about to do it. But if Indiana does this, if Indiana actually pulls this off, and you look at the bulk of their rotation with Halliburton at 25, Mathurin, who was awesome last night, at 22, TJ's 33. Certainly, he's up there. Nembhard's 25. Nesmith is 25. Shepard's 23. Siakam is 31. But even Toppin is 29. Miles Turner should not be 29. I feel like he should be 45. He's been around forever. But the bulk of this rotation is either in the prime of their career or just entering. Is it safe to say, or it's not safe to say, is there anything here where if they can actually get that done with Boston in flux, New York clearly don't know what they're doing as far as this coaching search. And there's some other teams we can throw in the mix. But is there a chance that Indiana might be the class of the East, at least for a little while, if they actually pull this off?
I feel like it's not just that it's a stretch to start jumping ahead about them winning the championship. It's more like I just think that we're in a time in the NBA where nobody can sustain anything for very long. I know the Thunder certainly feel like they're built that way. The Pacers, as you just laid out, seem to be built to last for a while. Things just change so fast in this league. And we're about to get what's, more or less a gap year from the Celtics, right? They win a championship. They fall short this time. Tatum's out for a year with the Achilles. And I think it's safe to say that the East next season is going to feel wide open on October 24th or whatever opening night is. But a lot of it's going to depend on all right, what do the Knicks do with their coaching search, and do they hold on to this core? Do they make some adjustments? Is Cleveland holding on to its primary core? Does Orlando finally get a point guard to go with their 2 stars, and could that launch them into the mix in the East? Is Giannis staying? Because it's starting to feel like maybe he's staying. It's been a lot of weeks have gone by without a trade demand or anything, and no substantial chatter about an actual trade. Maybe he's staying. I don't know that puts Giannis or puts the Bucks in the mix, but okay, what moves are they making? Are they rebuilding on the fly? Can they do enough quickly enough to be in the mix there? And the Pacers, win or lose, I don't care either way at this point. They're definitely the favorites in the East going in next season. I think. Like I just think that that has to be the case. You defer to the team that just won the damn conference, and so championship or no championship, the Pacers deserve to be the favorites in the East on opening night. But again, we have a lot of off season to go, and teams are going to make moves.
All right, Howard, before I say you lose, I want you to put your Anthony Bourdain hat. We're going to do the Howard Beck parts unknown take. You told us OKC had a great breakfast spot. What's standing out about the lovely metropolis of Indianapolis?
Actually, I want to go back to OKC for a second. I just want to tell you and your listeners, I had a phenomenal Laotian meal at dinner, a place called Ma Der Lao.
Okay.
It's obviously Laos close to Thailand, so like that kind of flavor, incredible. I know that is the last thing anybody would have expected about Oklahoma City, but phenomenal Laotian food.
Love it.
We just got here, so like I got here late on the off night, so I've had a press room meal, which there's nothing to talk about there, and of course our one off night where I did get dinner. My editor took us all to St. Elmo's, which is the least creative response I could give you because St. Elmo's, for anybody who doesn't know, is just an absolute institution in Indianapolis. Steakhouse. They're famous for their shrimp cocktail and their shrimp cocktail sauce. Great meal, but it is the least interesting answer that I could give you. I do not know where I'm going yet tonight, so maybe I'll have a better answer next time we speak.
Media member you would most like to see when entering a restaurant, and media member that would cause you to turn around and walk outside the door.
Nope, not going
No,
there.
but that laugh indicated that you had a name. That laugh indicated you had a name that entered your head, Howard. That's all I'm saying.
I'm just not going to start, stirring it up with my media brethren at this stage. That seems unwise.
Porter, let Dave McMiniman know that Howard Beck hates him when we have him on this week. I kid.
I haven't seen him the entire finals. I don't know where he is.
I kid.
There's this. You guys already know this much. If I see Mannix, I'm going the other direction.
For sure.
But
For sure. That's all of us. That's a consensus. All right, my friend. We'll set you loose. Safe travels. Enjoy the rest of the finals. We'll chat soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, the great Howard Beck from The Ringer. Always appreciate his time. Covers the NBA for The Ringer after a stop at the New York Times, LA Times. He covered the Lakers, the Knicks. He's been doing it at a high level for a long, long time now. And Howard stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at All Poly Sports. It's their Rising Stars Camp. It's coming up June the 17th through the 18th at Lone Peak Park, 10140 South, 700 East in Sandy. Full padded, full contact camp. But you must provide your own equipment: helmet, shoulder pads, knee pads, chin strap, mouth guard, jersey, and cleats. Your camp fee does not include lodging, meals, football equipment, or transportation. And due to NCAA rules, reduced fee or scholarships are not available. All Poly Sports is non-refundable. Register for the Rising Stars Camp if you are currently in grades 6th through the 8th. More information can be found at allpolysports.com. All right, we'll switch gears. The U.S. Open at Oakmont going on right now. Round 1 nearly in the books. We'll bring in Cam Rogers coming up. Going to do some college football with Matt Brown. We have Sports Court later on. Then we'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program on a beautiful Thursday afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City. So keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Matt Brown's going to stop by coming up in just a little bit. We'll move over to some sports court, then the 5 o'clock hour of the program. A lot of NBA Finals action, of course, NHL Final as well. You can hear both those series on our radio station. NHL tonight, NBA resumes tomorrow. But the U.S. Open is going on right now at a golf course that is bringing many of the best players in the world right to their knees, as expected. Join us now to talk some golf, one of our favorites, Cam Rogers. Happy Thursday, Cam. How are you, sir?
What's going on, Spence? Good to be with you. Excited for a whole lot of carnage here this week at Oakmont. It's not going to be easy, as you know.
And that's where I want to start. Just how hard is this golf course? I mean, we heard the rough was going to be 5.5 inches. The greens are rolling at like a 14 or a 15. And we'll get to the players that seem to have been able to find a little bit of success today. But just how tough is this track, Cam?
I would argue that it's probably the toughest course on the planet. I mean, it's just absolutely a beast. And it's only gotten harder over the course of the last couple of editions of the U.S. Open at this golf course. They've lengthened it, obviously, more bunkering. The fairways are so narrow, like probably 24 yards wide, which is unheard of in the game of golf. So guys have to be uber accurate off the tee, but also long. This is not a short golf course. And so that's how U.S. Opens are going to play going forward, especially here this week. You got to bring your elite driver game. That's why it's not surprising, say, that you see a Jon Rahm at the top of the board, somebody who I liked going into this week just because the rough is so penal, the bunkering is horrible, really hard for your ball to hold onto these greens. It's been fairly dry throughout the week, so that's going to make things pretty difficult on top of everything else. The winning score back in 2007 was +4 by Angel Cabrera. I don't think we get that this week. I think we'll probably be hovering around 2 or 1. Dustin Johnson won back in 2016 at 4 under par. That kind of makes sense, too. There's some guys at 4 under par, but I expect some backpedaling here. This is going to be the ultimate test. So if you enjoy professional golfers struggling just like you out there on the golf course, you're going to get it this week.
So give us some names, Cam. And obviously we have not all of round one in the books, but we do have a decent sample size. And J.J. Spahn was able to tame the course a bit, carding a 66. Sanjay M is 4 under through 12. Holy smokes. So based off of your knowledge of the course and your knowledge of these players, and even with a little bit of data now, give me some names that you think will be in the mix come Sunday.
Yeah, this is the classic Thursday afternoon sort of reaction for me when I'm following a major championship. I'm sort of laughing at what we have right now in terms of the leaderboard because I guarantee you it's going to look a lot different by the time Sunday afternoon comes around. A lot of these guys are just not all that experienced on the major championship stage. Ben Griffin, for instance, Matthew Pavon, no disrespect to these guys, they're great talents, but you just expect them to backpedal a little bit. This is too much of a beast in Oakmont for them to hang around. J.J. Spahn is super interesting to me because his iron game has immensely improved. His MO used to be his elite putting, and so that would allow him to win or contend on coastal courses or resort courses where they're typically birdie fest, not necessarily a grinded out affair. But now his iron game is absolutely fantastic, one of the best on the PGA Tour, and that's why you have him at the top of the board. Sanjay M has some good history at majors, particularly at the Masters, not so much at the U.S. Open, but that certainly could change for him. Sam Burns probably should have won last week, Spence, but he didn't. He lost in a playoff to Ryan Fox. He's right there at 3 under par. I do not expect him to go away. But the big name for me is Jon Rahm, sitting there at 2 under par through 14 holes. He was a top 10 pick for me going into this week. I thought this course perfectly fit his game, much like Bryson DeChambeau as well. So I think as of now, if I were to live bet anything, it'd probably be Jon Rahm, who won the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines a few years ago, to win here this week. But some interesting names as you go down: Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth, so we'll see.
What about Sam Burns, who's 3 under through 14? And Sam's an interesting name to me because at one point I think he was considered one of the big rising stars on the tour, and it just hasn't fully come together with him. But as he sits here, tied for second, and again, it's so early. Do you think he might be in the mix this weekend? You think he'll have something to say on Sunday afternoon?
Eventually hopefully he's going to build up some sort of major championship resume, because right now he only has one top 10, albeit it was at the U.S. Open last year with a T9 finish. T19 at the PGA Championship this year, T46 at the Masters. It's kind of a middling sort of resume for him, but I think he's got a solid enough sample size that lends me to believe that he'll soon enough contend in these majors. So I do think Sam Burns is indeed going to hang around throughout the week. His ball striking has immensely improved. He's not having as good of a season this year as he did last year, but you were seeing some signs before the RBC Canadian Open last week that the iron game was coming around, and that's the key with him. So I certainly think he'll be a factor here this week. Again, he should have won last week, but did not, and sometimes that can go either way, right? You're down in the dumps the following week, or you're motivated to win the next tournament. So we'll see.
Just kind of go down the list a little bit with some of the big dogs, the bigger names, and, Jordan Spieth, once upon a time, the golden boy, the wonderkins, the rising star, the next Tiger, all the things. And I very much like Jordan, and I like cheering for him. Hopefully he can figure something out moving forward, because it's just been a long time since he's been a guy that has won, major championships, etc. But he's won under through 14. That's T10. What do you make of his chances throughout the course of the weekend? Again, I'll just say be in the mix come Sunday.
Yeah, 41st missed cut, 37th, 19th missed cut, 65th missed cut, 35th, 37th. Those are his U.S. Open finishes since he won the U.S. Open way back when at Chambers Bay. So listen, I think, he's so volatile now. He's not as consistent as he used to be, of course. His driver tends to be a little bit erratic. That's a big reason why he can't contend at a U.S. Open or a PGA Championship, because the rough is just too thick, and he's not strong enough to hack it out of that rough like a Bryson DeChambeau did back at Winged Foot a few years ago. So right now, he's intriguing to me. I just can't trust Jordan in any prediction sense, because I don't know which Jordan I'm going to get day in and day out. So it would be a great story to see him at the top of the board, I'll be honest with you, in terms of ratings and interest from fans, because the big elephant in the room right now is Tiger Woods. Is he ever going to come back at full strength? I don't necessarily know. Is there a possibility he retires? Yes, there certainly is. So we need these big names to play well. Scottie Scheffler's great. He's just not the personality of Jordan Spieth or Rory McIlroy or Bryson DeChambeau. So to answer your question, there's a very real possibility he could be a contender here this week. It's just hard to say, because week in and week out, it's like a missed cut, T10, T9, T46. It's kind of the Jordan game now.
We'll get back to the field in a moment, but you brought up Tiger, you brought up Eldrick. Let me ask you this, because if I have a golf guest on, and I'm somewhat new to covering the tour and covering the game of golf in a way that it's mostly basketball and football and stuff around here that's a little bit more resonating, but I have become captivated with the game over the past 5 years. I'm trying to get better myself. And so, I don't know that I completely have the context of what it means to say, is this player having a Tiger Woods type run? Because every time I have a good golf guest on that has covered the game or has followed the game forever, whenever I say that, I feel like I'm like insulting Jesus himself. People get, a little bit defensive. But what's fair to say about this run that Scotty's been on? And does it feel like, I guess the way I'll put it is, we are watching this generation's whatever that dude is?
Well, I'm not going to yell at you, Spence, but
Thank you,
I will
sir.
tell you, let's talk in 5 to 7 years. Like, he needs to keep this going at this pace for another half a decade or so. And then we can have that conversation. Until then, it's just really hard to say, because we were talking about this with Jordan Spieth back in 2015. We were talking about this with McIlroy back in 2014. What happened? McIlroy did not win another major until this year, So golf kind of has this funny way about, even when guys are playing really, really elite, it's only for a short span of time. Brooks Koepka has been an afterthought in major championships since he left for LIV. That could be a whole other kettle of fish, going to LIV and then, not having the same level of competition. But if Scottie Scheffler continues what he's doing for another few years, then yes, we could be on a Tiger Woods-esque track. But it's also worth noting that the presence that Scottie Scheffler provides is not what we got with Tiger. The presence that Tiger had, he instilled fear into other golfers out there. He had the swagger. He had the dagger eyes, if you will. I mean, Scotty Scheffler goes to church every Sunday. He's kind of Pillsbury Doughboy-ish. He's a nice guy. Like, he doesn't have that literal eye of the tiger, I guess you could say. So, in that sense, it's different. But if he keeps up this elite ball striking and the victories left and right, then, yeah, we could be on pace for the next Tiger Woods. But I am very, very far from saying that. I'm on, like, the, 75th yard line, if you will, from the end zone in terms of getting there with Scotty.
All right, back to the field. And Cam, with the way you describe the track and the way you describe the tournament, and also combine that with what Brooks tends to do during major championships, seems to indicate that maybe Brooksy might have a weekend that puts him in the mix as well. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, really interesting. Even par through 15. It's a total flip from what we've seen from him at recent major championships. Brooks in the majors this year, first 4 rounds, plus 14, 24 bogeys or worse. Front 9 today, 2 under par, bogey free. Maybe he found something. I think typically his game is better suited for a U.S. Open or a PGA Championship because he has the power, he has the strength out of the rough. If he does spray it a little bit, that's a luxury at these tournaments, unlike for, say, a Jordan Spieth, like I mentioned, or Colin Morikawa. So let's wait and see, because we have not seen a whole lot of good data from Brooks at the majors since he left for LIV, but a really steady first day. If you are within 4 shots of the lead by the time today ends, I think you have a very real chance at winning the U.S. Open. 23 of the last 26 Open champions were within 4 shots after that opening round. So keep that in mind.
Okay, we'll expand that just a bit because there are a few names I want to kick the tires with you on. And I actually selfishly, I'm going to ask you about Sam Stevens, Cam, and I'm going to tell you why. So I had an opportunity, and it was my first time to go to Bay Hill. I'd never been to a PGA Tour event, and I was able to go to Bay Hill for Arnie's tournament. And we were honorary observers. And so we followed Sam Stevens and Nick Taylor around. And I'll tell you, he's the sweetest guy. I mean, when you're an honorary observer, you're basically like, don't talk, don't speak unless you're spoken to. You're not supposed to say much of anything. And Sam engaged us on almost like every single hole. So I cheer for the kid, and he is 5 shots back after carding a 71. I know he's young, but I feel like he's got a lot of game. Do you think he's got a shot here to make something interesting?
He'd be a great story, but he does not have one single top 30 at a major championship. Granted, he's only played in a handful, a couple of U.S. Opens and a couple of PGA championships, but he does have a 3rd-place finish at the CJ Cup for the Byron Nelson tournament earlier this year, T18 at the Texas Children's Houston Open. So clearly he likes playing in Texas. By the way, 2nd-place finish at the Farmers Insurance, which is at Torrey Pines, not an easy track. So maybe he can kind of carry over that good vibe, if you will, this week. It'd be great for you, Spence, to see him do well. I love hearing these stories because that's my experience, too, with a lot of these golfers. Really nice guys, really engaging. I've also been to the Arnold Palmer. It's a great experience. Highly recommend. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I could see maybe a top 20 finish for Sam. That'd be something that he can carry over into the next major championship. But as far as winning this week, that would be a major upset, in my opinion.
Few more interesting names at 1 over, which, to your point, doesn't put them 4 shots back, but does put them at 5 shots back. And I suppose we should put some respect on Colin Morikawa just based off his pedigree, who's 1 over through 14. So maybe he can still get within that 4-shot range. Just same question with a big-name star player in the PGA Tour ecosystem. What do you make of Colin's chances this weekend?
Yeah, I did not love this golf course for Colin. This is not like TPC Harding Park. This is not like the shorter U.S. Opens like at Pebble Beach, for instance, or the Country Club. So for Colin, there's just extra stress on your long iron game because he's not long off the tee. And so maybe he hits a lot of fairways, but he's got to be super accurate from 165 yards out, 170 yards out. That's a lot of stress. Now, he's a very steady golfer, obviously, one of the elite ball strikers in the game, does not make a whole lot of mistakes. But I would say he's better suited for an Open Championship, which he won back in 2021, or a Masters where he's been top 10 3 times and a couple of other top 20 finishes. 1 over par. Let's see if he can get to that magic number of even, because I do think we're going to end with 4 at the end of the day being that leading score. He's not a pick for me this week to be anywhere toward the top of the leaderboard. Immense talent. It's been a while, by the way, Spence, since he's last won on the PGA Tour. which makes me wonder, is he losing that clutch gene? We'll see, but great player, obviously, great guy, and a steady guy on the major championship stage. We'll see if he finishes inside the top 10.
Up and down year for Victor Hovland, but he also finds himself at 1 over through 14. Maybe he can get within that 4-shot range. What do you make of the potential for Victor to make things interesting over the weekend?
Yeah, he is that classic pick that I had this week from a talent perspective because his form really wasn't all that great going into this week, but one of the elite drivers of the golf ball. I mean, he absolutely tattoos the ball. As long as he's accurate, he's going to be a force at U.S. Opens, at PGA Championships. It's only a matter of time until he wins a major, in my opinion. The issue with him is always the scrambling. This is one of the toughest golf courses on the planet to scramble. So if he's missing greens, then he's in major, major trouble. But from a, again, talent perspective, and Ludwig Oberg is another guy who reminds me of this kind of talent. He could certainly win a major here this year. I would like for him to get to that even par number to get within that 4-shot differential. But, Victor Hovland is a guy who can fire a 66 out of nowhere, and I would not be shocked to see it happen this week.
Ludwig, 72. He's in the clubhouse 2 over, so that doesn't put him in your stratosphere of being able to win. But with a kid that has that type of talent, we probably should talk about his potential to bounce back, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, he was my pick to win going into this week, so I'm going to stick by him. 2 over par is not astronomically hard to come back from. Plus, I mean, it's interesting. JJ Spawn, Sanjay M, these are elite major championship contenders year in and year out. You would expect some backpedaling. It's so hard to follow up a really good round with another good round on the PGA Tour, let alone the U.S. Open. So, I loved Ludwig coming into this week. Another great driver of the golf ball. 6 top 25 finishes this season. T12 at the U.S. Open last year. He won the Genesis Invitational at Riviera, which is another difficult golf course. So you can translate that over to Oakmont here this week. So I think Ludwig has to go aggressive, though. Obviously, he played in the morning today. That does not help him because he's playing in the afternoon tomorrow, and typically scoring is a little bit tougher in that instance. But he's going to have to fire at a couple more flag sticks tomorrow to get back into the mix.
Of course, I'm going to ask you about Scotty, who's also outside of the 4-shot area, but he's 2 over through 14, and he was a historic favorite to win the tournament. And he feels like the type of guy just, stay around, just hang around, then go on like a Scotty type run. Are you surprised to see him at 2 over? And what do you make of, what he could potentially do the rest of the weekend?
You had to think at some point he was going to have maybe a rough week. For it to happen at the U.S. Open at Oakmont is not too surprising. It's way too early. It's only the first round. He's 2 over par. He's fine, but he's making way too many bogeys at this juncture. And I think part of it is if you really had to nitpick with his game, he can be a little bit erratic with his driver. And on this golf course, you're toast. And Scotty Scheffler does not have the strength of Brooks or say a Rory McIlroy even, or a Bryson DeChambeau to hack it out of that rough. The bomb and gouge sort of strategy does not work for Scotty. He needs to hit fairways. He's decently long, but he probably more so needs to hit fairways and be more accurate because he needs that clean lie for his elite ball striking. Has not hit a lot of fairways here today. But for anybody to think that Scotty Scheffler is out of it, I think would be a big mistake. At 2 over par, he could probably get it back to 1 or even with a couple more holes left to play. We'll see what happens. He's got a couple of long par 4s here to finish up, but a somewhat short par 4 on 17. Birdie opportunity there. But if he backpedals and finishes T11 here this week, I think he deserves a little bit of a break because he's been on absolute tear lately, and regression to the mean at some point is going to happen.
2 of the other betting favorites were Bryson DeChambeau and Rory McIlroy. More surprised to see Bryson card a 3 over or Rory card a 4 over?
Definitely about Bryson. Yeah, I was surprised there. I liked him for a top 10 here this week. Again, U.S. Open champion twice. His game fits perfectly for these golf courses. I could see him bouncing back nicely, maybe with a nice 2 under par score tomorrow to get him back to 1 over and maybe a somewhat in the mix heading into moving day. McIlroy is coming off a missed cut at the RBC Canadian Open. He's been a little bit inconsistent with his driver all of a sudden. I think he's trying to find something with his swing. And, this whole post-Masters complacency could be a factor. I'm not saying he's lost the hunger to win on the PGA Tour, but when you reach the mountaintop of a career Grand Slam, it is natural from a mental standpoint to just kind of lay down your arms a little bit. You go on Jimmy Kimmel, you do all the media hits, you know what I mean? So it gets to you a little bit from a mental perspective, and we're starting to see that with his play. So I think there needs to be a period of reset for Rory before he wins another major.
Speaking of the Slam, is this Phil's last chance to try? And he's not going to get it done, but is it his last chance to get it done? Yeah.
Yeah, 4 over par. He even said it earlier this week, or actually it was last week, talking to the Live folks, that, this is probably my last real shot. And unless he goes absolutely nuclear tomorrow, fires a 6 under. And Spence, I love witnessing history. When Phil got it done back in 2021 at Kiowa at the age of 50, I mean, really remarkable stuff. I think it's over. So his exemption does run out at the U.S. Open after this iteration here this year. The only way he gets into the U.S. Open is through qualifying, of course, and I don't know if he wants to do that, or maybe he plays on the senior tour and wins a couple of tournaments there, or he gets a special exemption from the USGA. And I just don't see that happening. It's only happened once in the USGA's history for an exemption for someone who hasn't won the U.S. Open, and that was Nick Price. Maybe Phil gets it, top 3 player, of this millennium, if you will. But, I'd say it's over, even though I really want him to get it done, because 6 runner-up finishes, Spence, that's heartbreaking at the U.S. Open.
It is. All right, buddy, before I set you loose, we're broadcasting about 5 or 6 miles away from where Tony Finau cut his teeth as a junior golfer. So I've got a 2-tiered question for you about Tony. Because, again, the way you describe the course, it actually feels like it would be something that Tony could handle. He has not handled it well. He's certainly not alone because he's with Justin Thomas and Akshay Bhatia, Patrick Cantlay. A lot of good golfers are in that mix at 6 over par. So your thoughts on Tony's struggle so far? And then if I could expand the question, he just hasn't looked sharp pretty much all year. Wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Finau really is not doing anything all that exceptionally well. And that's the issue right now. You need to be really, really good at something to contend in major championships. And that was the theme for him from 2018 to 2021. He was ripping off top 10s all over the place. You only knew that it was going to be a matter of time for him to maybe win a Masters tournament or a PGA championship. But since that T8 at the PGA in 2021, just one top 10 finish at the U.S. Open, albeit last year. But he is not the ball striker that he was. That's number one. He's not accurate off the tee. Obviously, his putter has never been his strong suit. So when you lose the best part of your game, which is your iron game, and you can't improve anywhere else, that's why you get results from Tony Finau. Only one top 10 finish here on the PGA Tour this season. He's been making cuts. He's catching checks, T15, T19, T32, but that's not Tony Finau standards. I mean, he was once contending at majors left and right. So until he improves his iron game, it's probably just going to be him making cuts, not really contending, and kind of stuck in neutral, unfortunately.
All right, Cam, where can everybody go find your work, bud?
Yeah, Cam Rogers Live on all social media. I have to mention, Spence, I saw Third Eye Blind for the first time live last weekend. Exceptional.
Oh, Cam, that's something you and I will always just have to agree to disagree upon, but that's fine. That's what makes the world go around, my friend. Thanks so much for the time. Enjoy the tournament, okay?
Thanks, man. Take it easy.
All right, Cam Rogers, one of our favorites to talk golf. Appreciate his time today. Stops by courtesy of our friends at You Went to Golf. So time now for our You Went to Golf PGA Tour leaderboard update. JJ Spaun, 66. He's in the clubhouse at 4 under. Looks like Thriston Lawrence, 3 under par. Sungjae Im was 4 under through 12. He just bogeyed, so he's 3 under. Siwoo Kim, 2 under, as is Sam Burns. Cam Young at 2 under par through 13. Couple of notables, Jordan Spieth, 1 under, as is John Rahm and Patrick Reed. Let's see here. Brooks Koepka is even, as obviously he competes for major championships all the time. Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland at 1 over. Ludwig Oberg, Xander Schauffele, Scotty Scheffler, 2 over par. Scotty's still on the course. Keegan Bradley at 3 over. So is Bryson DeChambeau. Looks like Rory McIlroy, 4 over par. As far as the local guys go, not a great round one for any of them, at least so far. Zach Blair at 4 over. Tony Finau and Preston Summerhays are both at 6 over par. Tony is still on the course. We'll keep you up to date as to whether or not he can go low the rest of the round. Check out the Callaway situation over at Uinta Golf. You can help Dad unlock more control. Father's Day ride around the corner with a 50% bonus trade-in towards Elite and Apex clubs and 10% off of select iron sets at Uinta Golf. Callaway irons are definitely something you should look at. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We'll switch gears. College football coming up next with our buddy Matt Brown. We're going to do some sports court today, and then we'll get back to some NBA playoffs and some Jazz offseason stuff. The NHL Stanley Cup final rolls on tonight. Busy Thursday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, we'll do a little sports court coming up with our friends from Handy and Handy. Maybe the latest on the civil lawsuit filed against Jake Rolap, or not Jake Retzlaff. Brian Rolap was just named CEO of the PGA Tour. So stay tuned for that. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program. Don't forget Stanley Cup Final on the radio station tonight. We'll see if Edmonton can tie it up. NBA Finals resume tomorrow, but let's do some college football. The business of collegiate athletics with, I'm going to start calling him the professor because we're about to sit down and we're about to take a class from the great Matt Brown on a Thursday. Matt, happy Thursday, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Always glad to spend some time with you.
I appreciate the time. So, of course, last Friday, about 10 minutes after we signed off air, actually, I get the alert on my phone that House v. NCAA has actually been pushed across the line. So let's start with somebody like you who does this and does it at a high level consistently. Your main takeaways about, the details you were able to ascertain and ultimately what you think would be most interesting to our college football and college athletic fans here in the market.
Yeah, what I would tell folks here is there in the immediate, immediately after the Judge Wilkin issued the ruling, things don't change all that much. Folks at Utah and BYU and USU and Weber and everybody else have been operating on the assumption that this settlement would eventually be approved largely as written for the last 6 to 9 months. All the contracts have already been written. The reorganizations have already been set. So once this is approved, you basically just hear a collective sigh of relief throughout ADs in this industry, realizing like, okay, I don't have to completely destroy all my budget projections now that the new season is starting in 2.5 weeks. But this doesn't produce any kind of immediate, long-lasting labor or regulatory piece. In the short term, it's going to mean that come July 1, schools in this market and throughout the Big 12 and throughout the country will be able to pay athletes directly in cash for the first time, not just via scholarship. They don't have to route it through a collective or launder it through a charity or do anything else. The money that they get from ESPN and from Learfield and from ticket sales can be redistributed in part to athletes. And so now everyone has a salary cap to manage, and how they construct their roster is going to look a little bit different than how it did over the previous couple of seasons. As
you point out in your newsletter, and as you just articulated, not much has changed, but there are plenty of things that still need clarity and issues that still need to be solved and lawsuits that have been filed, including a recent one with some Title IX implications. So what are the next steps? What comes next, Matt?
Well, there's really 3 things that are going to be happening all concurrently. One, to your earlier point, is there will be entities that are going to sue to try and prevent part of this settlement from going into effect. We had an appeal just filed challenging some of the back payments on Title IX grounds. That lawsuit does not seek to change the clearinghouse or the ability for schools to pay athletes starting next month, but it would delay back payment checks for people whose collegiate eligibility ended in 2017 who are due some back payment money while those issues are resolved. I imagine there'll be other lawsuits. There'll probably be lawsuits that challenge the NIL clearinghouse, NIL Go, and the ability of the NCAA to enforce some of these rules. Court cases take a long time. That could take years to be settled. You're also going to see a renewed push to get something done in Congress. There was a hearing today in the House over a proposed bill called the SCORE Act that would give the NCAA, among other things, the antitrust exemption necessary to enforce these NIL rules without being sued into oblivion. And the U.S. Senate is likely to consider similar legislation over the course of the next month. I think that we're going to get a resolution to what this Congress plans to do, if anything, about college sports before the fall, way before any of the lawsuits are done. And that has a major impact on how sticky or permanent the House settlement rules are going to end up being. And then while all that's happening, there's actual sports and schools are going to be cutting checks and writing contracts and then trying to figure out how can they either cut enough costs or generate enough new revenue to offset the new $20+ million that they have to pay out directly to athletes, which means get ready to see ads on stuff like never before.
All right, about an hour ago, Ross Dellinger tweeted out that congressmen from Tennessee, Utah, which is, of course, where we're at, and California have introduced what is the NCAA Accountability Act. I don't know. Have you been able to dig through this? Do you understand, exactly what it is and what it means? And certainly since we're involved out here.
Yeah, I saw the tweet and I was trying to find the press release or the exact language of the bill, and I'm sure it exists, but the only one that I found from Congressman Owens and the gentleman from Tennessee and California was from 2021. A renewal of that bill. So I don't know if anything has specifically changed here. I know the last time that bill was introduced, it was really centered on trying to limit the kind of punitive damages the NCAA could put out during an investigation towards schools or potentially athletes on NIL grounds. I would imagine that's limiting the kind of power that the NCAA has if you give them an antitrust exemption, defining how narrow that scope could be. I'm sure that's going to be a very critical part of the negotiations between the House and the Senate.
So ultimately, every member institution in the P4 ecosystem is unique and different. And certainly out here in Salt Lake City, the football program, like in most places, generates most of the revenue and most of the interest. But we have a very popular gymnastics team, the Red Rocks out here, who also actually are a revenue-generating product for the University of Utah. It will be 10 years this year since the men's basketball program made it to the NCAA tournament, which is still so wild. So I don't know if I can ask you a blanket statement or a blanket question about how each member institution will divvy up the $20.5 million that they're now allowed to pay the young people who play sports for the institutions. But what are your thoughts, generally speaking, on this challenge and task that athletic directors have now, and how do you think it will be handled for the most part throughout the course of these conferences and member institutions?
It's a really tricky question, and I don't think that there's an obvious right answer. The most common way that P4 institutions are looking at divvying up their house money is roughly 75% of it being directed to the football team, roughly 15% going to men's basketball, and then usually some disproportionate chunk of the remainder to women's hoops, and then paying out to everything else. But that formula doesn't work everywhere. I think a good example I read recently at UMass, who has won national championships in men's hockey before, and also understands that it doesn't matter whether you put $2, $4, $6, or $10 million into football, you're still nowhere close to competing for a college football playoff bid. They haven't even made a bowl yet. So it would make sense to spend a little bit less on football so you can kick in. I think they're looking at around $700,000, $800,000 towards your men's hockey payroll, which would put you in the top 10% throughout the country. So a school like Utah, I think unquestionably will need to look at how you can fund Red Rocks, knowing that you're going to be going up against LSU or Georgia or other big SEC programs or UCLA to keep that funding. And maybe that means maybe you spend a little bit less on women's basketball, hypothetically, than another peer institution might, so you can afford to distribute that. Another big change that you're going to see a lot in the West, although I don't think in this market specifically, is what to do about college baseball, because college baseball is still one of the few nationally sponsored sports where mid-majors can compete for national championships and can regularly get great seeding in the NCAA tournament. And so if you are a school like UC Irvine or somebody in the Big West or the WCC, you might decide it makes sense to make a big investment in baseball, knowing that the Big Ten is going to spend $0 on any of this stuff, and some of the Sun Belt schools might spend less. So you can have an advantage. Everyone has to consider what kind of money can be raised through other marketing deals that are going to be approved and above the cap, and where else can we make an investment to win championships? And that is going to look different from every sport, every school.
BYU is a very unique place for a number of different reasons, but of course, I just, Penny, for your thoughts on how you anticipate them handling this new reality for them. I mean, it's just a unique place with a unique mindset and idea on how money should be distributed and what you should do with it and all that. I mean, Utah's a little bit more front-facing as a public institution, but your thoughts on what you think we'll see as far as BYU handling their ability to distribute these funds?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing just from the outside, and again, this is coming from a guy in Illinois, right? is that BYU's made it pretty clear we are in it to be nationally relevant and competitive in men's basketball. And I think you can do that at a place like BYU, knowing that a men's basketball roster is there's 13 people. You're only going to really play 8 or 9. And you can bring in transfers, or you can bring in high school recruits or folks that might only have to commit to living the BYU lifestyle for a short amount of time. Those rosters are by their nature way more transient than football. I don't think you can build a high-quality football roster that turns over 70% through the transfer portal and then not be able to keep those guys in and year out. That's typically the hardest kind of sport for schools with recruiting challenges to build out. So I would. I'm not saying that the BYU is going to cut the NIL budget for BYU football to $300,000 and some Maverick gift cards or anything, but I know from the outside it's clear they're going to try to push in their chips for men's basketball, and other schools like Texas Tech have decided to make investments in football and in softball differently. If I'm BYU, I probably wouldn't spend a dime on baseball, where you've stunk and mostly stunk here for a while, and is now a pretty competitive league. So you can save some of that money to maybe make bets elsewhere.
A couple hours after the announcement that the settlement was approved, it was announced that Brian Seeley, who's a former Major League Baseball executive, has been named CEO of a new enforcement organization called the College Sports Commission. Matt, what is that, and what's the role of Brian Seeley throughout the course of this entire thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the College Sports Commission is the entity that's going to be in charge of enforcing the terms of the House settlement. So if you are a D1 athletic department and you have athletes that are not academically eligible or who are breaking NCAA certification rules for something other than amateurism, the NCAA can still enforce those rules and still sanction you. You can still get put in an APR jail if your guys aren't going to class. But if you're breaking the salary cap, then it's CSC that's going to be looking into it, which is established by the Power Four conferences. There's this clearinghouse that's established and run by Deloitte, this massive accounting and consulting company. And the Power Four commissioners looked and thought, okay, we need somebody that's clearly not a peer of existing institutions, which has always been a problem with NCAA investigations. And you want somebody with experience and gravitas. And looking into financial accounting, and which is something that you have here with Major League Baseball. The question is the same question I think that it's been in many ways for 150 years, right? Athletic directors, by and large, if you put a microphone in front of them, and I was just at NACDA, I did this to a bunch of folks myself, will tell you they're cautiously optimistic that schools will abide by the terms of this settlement. They want structure. They want regulation. People are sick of the wild, wild west. And then when you talk to coaches or folks that work in player personnel or recruiting operations, they will laugh and say, no, everyone's still going to cheat because people have been cheating for 150 years. The only way you get people to stop cheating is not because they are so ideologically committed to fair play and the spirit of brotherhood. They do it because they're afraid of consequences that are severe. It's why you don't see as much completely flagrant evasion of the NBA salary caps, because people don't want to have lose draft picks or get punished like the Timberwolves did for Joe Smith back in the day. The only way we know if that happens in college is to test it and see if it sticks. Because if CSC decides to smack down a NIL deal that somebody at Tennessee offers, where they're paying an offensive lineman $900,000 to make 2 Instagram posts, will Tennessee accept it, or will they call their state attorney general and sue over it? That's the big question. And if you don't have the legal protection to enforce these rules, which the NCAA is seeking right now, I don't think it matters if your head investigator is from the Major League Baseball or from the NBA or Colombo or Dick Tracy or anybody else. You're still going to end up in court.
I had a snarky Joe Smith joke, but in Salt Lake City, I'm going to keep that to myself today, Matt, so we'll just move on. So starting on June the 7th, players were required to report NIL deals of $600 or more to this newly formed College Sports Commission. You referenced the Deloitte angle earlier. I guess it's going to be a combination of Deloitte and this LBI software that are going to monitor both salary cap management and the NIL clearinghouse. So help us understand this process. How does this work? And does it feel like, at least best laid plans indicate, that they're also trying to make the NIL ecosystem a level playing field across the board?
I think it isn't just a level playing field across the board so much as there really is a desire to improve things from a consumer protection perspective. Athletic leaders don't want athletes to sign deals and then not get paid, or to sign deals with unaccountable third parties where they can't meaningfully sue. And then when they thought they were going to get $100,000, they just get $12 and some protein bars. And that's part of what this clearinghouse is meant to alleviate. You actually raised a really important question about how this actually all works, practically speaking. That was a big part of this gigantic athletic director conference where I was at these past couple of days, and they gave big trainings on here's how the software works, and here's what kind of deals you're obligated to report, and here's the enforcement process, and here's what this all looks like. And there's still a ton of follow-up questions because it's almost as if this is an enormously complicated enterprise. And there's, as best as I can tell, there's still ADs that have a lot of concerns about international athlete NIL reporting, or how a company is deemed an affiliated actor, and if you're a company that has an unrelated software deal with the university, can you do an NIL deal? These are all things that are going to get hammered out over the coming weeks and months, either through lawsuits or through administrative fiat. I think the important thing to know is that anybody who's paying athletes more than $600, whether you're an auto dealership or a software company or a protein bar or a university, you need to be prepared to come correct with your paperwork so it can pass this valuation inspection.
Let me reduce that previous question to a statement, because we exist in a state that has a big-time inferiority complex with two college football programs that are really, really good. And, Utah State, Bronco Mendenhall, respectfully, we'll include them in that in this conversation too. Do you feel like the playing field is even now? Or to your earlier point, no matter what you do, there will always be the car dealer in Tuscaloosa that has an extra $5 million laying around somewhere?
I mean, it's literally never been equal. It's not equal because college athlete talent is not uniformly distributed equally.
Right.
It's better now in Utah than it's probably ever been, but there's going to be more Power 4 level players coming out of metropolitan New Orleans or metropolitan Birmingham or for that matter, Cincinnati, then there usually is in the entire state of Utah. And so you're already at a disadvantage. It's not easy to convince kids from Atlanta and from South Florida or parts of Texas to come here. Both schools do. All of these schools do, but it's easier if you're Miami or Ohio State or Texas. It's never been easy or equitable from a financial playing field, just like it isn't in Major League Baseball and it isn't in international soccer or in other sports without a salary cap. I think if you are looking to the House settlement, or if you are looking for Congress to make changes that would institute some kind of financial parity, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's not really what this is about. Now, both Utah and BYU have won a lot of college football games, despite not having rosters that look like, or budgets that look like Ohio State or Texas or Notre Dame. And I think that there are still pathways for them to do that. But football is not the sport where I would be looking to see major shifts in parity. I think if you want that, there's more of it in basketball. There's more of it in some of these Olympic sports.
So my entire life has been spent around and working in professional sports. So I kind of approach this whole, 2 or 3 year news cycle in a way where I've talked often about my belief that a pro sports model can solve a lot of the issues that have plagued collegiate athletics ever since transfer portal and NIL became a reality. Will these contracts include buyout clauses? And if so, does that mean the wave of transfers every few months might end?
It might end. And I know this is a terrible sports radio answer, but we really don't know how enforceable a lot of these contracts are. My understanding is that a buyout provision in an employment contract is likely to be enforced differently than a buyout provision in a marketing contract. You can't really, if somebody's getting $300,000 for marketing services, and I'm making huge air quotes in my hands right now because it's definitely for playing sports, your ability to prove like injury or damage of $300,000 or more if somebody leaves is harder to prove than they're in for an employment situation. So we have contracts that exist right now that have buyout provisions, and schools will have the ability, if they so choose, to try and sign athletes to multi-year deals. Some schools will try to do that, but the majority of them won't, because as much as they hate the transfer portal and as much as they hate that instability, they hate the idea of making a gigantic commitment to an 18-year-old even more. Utah is the only place that seems to be very comfortable making gigantic commitments with 19 and 20-year-olds. Most people are hesitant to get married for that kind of thing, right? They want to wait a year or two. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what the courts think. We'll have to see what the clearinghouse thinks. I imagine there will be some decline in transfer portal activity if boosters are not able to just funnel in $6 million above the cap, because it'll be harder for people to make money by constantly transferring. But I don't think we're looking at a world where there's labor peace in our time.
Well played, sir. Before I set you loose, do you think we are moving closer and closer and closer to collectively bargaining? I have no idea, whether or not the players at some point will kind of come together, form a union, have representation, but this is not something that they collectively bargained. And as the numbers rise, as they will continue to rise, it's $20.5 million for this year, but revenue continues to go up. So the ability to pay them more will also continue to be a reality. Will we ever see the players have the ability to collectively bargain?
Will we ever see that? I think probably someday, but I realize this is controversial among my reporter friends. I don't think we're particularly close to it right now, even though there's a lot of folks that are on the outside really pushing for it. There's two big reasons. In order to collectively bargain, you have to have a representative for management and a representative for labor. Management cannot create a labor union for you. And we've now had several years for college athletes to have an opportunity to try and organize in a professional association or a proto-union or some kind of group to push for these changes. And it hasn't happened. And not only has it not happened, only one group has come even a tiny little bit close, which is athletes.org. And at some point, I think we have to recognize that by not organizing and by not clamoring for employment classification and by not joining these organizations, that athletes are making a vote, which is that they don't want that or that they don't want to do the things that are required to have that. So you're going to need to see a lot more class consciousness and labor consciousness among current college athletes before collective bargaining can happen. Could it happen in the future someday? Sure, but that's not where we are right now. The other thing we have to realize here is that collective bargaining also requires the certification here from the government, from the state. It's harder because athletes are not considered employees right now. And forgive me if this is particularly partisan, but we do not have an organized labor-friendly president right now or a Republican-controlled Congress in the House or the Senate that is especially sympathetic to organized labor. I happen to know that this state is not especially sympathetic to organized labor. And so it's difficult for me to see the court system or lawmakers jumping up and saying, yes, we should move to this particular system, because it's going to be giving the steelworkers or the AFL-CIO a big win, or whoever ends up kind of operating that particular union. In a different world and different political climate with different numbers and different athletes, sure. But I'm not expecting it to happen today or tomorrow.
All right, Professor Brown, where can people go get all the work?
You can find my work at extrapointsmb.com. I promise you not everything that I write is about the federal government or about labor law and everything. There are jokes. There's video game coverage. We've got some reporting coming up on Division I soccer and a few other things. But if you want to understand what's going on in this world, you can find it there at extrapointsmb.com.
Thank you, my sir. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, sir. I combine those two. Have a great weekend, Matt. We'll chat soon, okay?
You bet. Take care.
All right, Extra Points, extrapointsmb.com. It's one of my favorite college football and college athletics newsletter. I read it pretty much every time he drops one. Use it a lot for prep for the show, so definitely check it out with our good friend Matt Brown. Stop him by. All right, before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH, where you're just going to save a bunch of money. It's the bottom line. What's going on, Ryan?
That is right. And, exciting offer right now with Dish. And this is just a awesome opportunity. You do not want to miss this. extra piece that we got added to the promotion with Dish. You get set up, guys. There is the 2-year promotion where you get credits for 2 years, huge credits. And this is going to be significantly less than what you're paying, especially cable, DirecTV customers. Plan on minimum 30, but I see sometimes more like $40 to $60 a month savings. But we'll get you 3 months for free if you call and get set up on this promotion. Now, this is a limited time offer, so you do not want to wait. Pick up the phone and call us right now. Get the 3 months free offer, the price guarantee. We'll get you the biggest, fastest DVR out there. We'll auto-hop commercials, auto-record your games. Plus, also ask about internet. We've got a half a dozen internet providers, and I'm not kidding about that. You name it, we pretty much have it available. And packages as low as $20, $30. Bunch of them are 40 to 50, just depending on what you're looking for. But listen, if your internet is glitchy, slow, or your bill is just blown up, don't overpay. Pay less. Upgrade. We'll get you all set up. We've even got some great tricks when we switch over your Wi-Fi so you don't have to reset everything, so it's super easy. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, got a little sports court coming up on the other side. Then we'll get into the 5 o'clock hour of the program before we say goodnight in time for a little Stanley Cup final hockey on a Thursday edition of The Drive. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends Garrett and Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. Gentlemen, happy Thursday. How are we doing?
Hey, Spence. Happy Thursday.
Doing good. Hi, Spence.
Appreciate your time. Good to have you back, Garrett. Before we get to the rundown, the Salt Lake Tribune with some reporting on just a general outline of what's next with the civil suit that has been filed against BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff. So I know there's nothing new, but it's of tremendous interest in the market. So either one of you can take it. I'm just curious if you could help us understand what the next steps in what I understand could be a very lengthy process are.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The next steps are what was filed as a complaint. That's a civil pleading that sets forth all of the allegations. And as we've learned that there was an amended complaint that kind of tweaked some of the things that were going on. And so what usually happens after that, a summons and complaint are served, and I don't think that'll happen. Probably the defense attorney, who's already made an appearance, probably accepted service, so Jake Retzlaff didn't have to be actually served somewhere. That's kind of a little bit embarrassing. But so right now I think there's a hold going on right now where the defense, his attorneys are preparing what's called an answer, where they will file a complete pleading, which will basically address every paragraph, point, provision of the complaint, addressing, allegations denied, qualifying them, different things. Maybe there's not enough facts to make a decision on right now, and that'll be filed. And then the court will set a schedule. They'll send it to the party and say, here's the schedule to get this done, this done, this done, and this done. And it'll, enter a lengthy phase of what's called discovery, where a lot of depositions, interrogatories, tracking down people who might have information on this. And so I don't think we'll hear a lot about it. I mean, it'll be, I suspect that the defense, I think Garrett would probably agree that they'll file what's to close the case so people don't have access to it. The media can't go in there and look at what's been filed. It'll be, under lock, really, with the court. That's my guess.
Any thoughts, Garrett, or just want to get to the rundown?
Well, I just was going to say I saw the Tribune article. I thought it was a good summary, that the article that you mentioned. But one of the things that I think is interesting is the implications with his NIL contract, right? And what kind of quote unquote morality clause is in his contract, and if that can be rescinded at this point, even with just a civil case where nothing's been proven yet, right? It hasn't been found liable for anything. It's just a complaint that's been filed, but. BYU is certainly going to be making some decisions, not only about his NIL contract, but, if he's playing. I mean, we haven't heard anything, so we'll be seeing.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to the rundown. And, guys, we did it. After years and years and years, you've been coming on this radio show for nearly 6 years, and we have been discussing the House v. NCAA settlement. When will we see it? What will it look like? Well, we did it. It's across the line. I'm excited to hear your thoughts, so I'll just give you the space. What do you want our listeners to know?
Yeah, I hope everyone's not tired of it, and we'll probably still be talking about the next story Garrett's going to hit on. We'll address that, but the House versus NCAA settlement, three different suits brought lawsuits against the NCAA alleging that they had been denied certain things. NIL was already in place, but denied essentially a share of broadcast rights, that the NCAA and schools were profiting from their work and everything. So, as it went along, it was going through litigation, and the NCAA saw a big risk because they could get hit with a big thing and would just demolish everything. So 2 years ago, they entered into a settlement which would share, I think, $2.8 billion with schools and with athletes. And the essential term of it was that schools could pay directly to the athletes. They could share these broadcast rights and this money directly with the athletes. Well, it took 2 years to get here, Spence. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of objectors, and right down to the tail end, the main thing that was kind of at issue was these roster limits. But Judge Wilkins signed it, so now it's an agreement. I mean, it's a legal agreement, but it's in court, and the judge has signed it, approving it. And the essential terms of it are, number one, that the schools can pay directly to their athletes, and that's right now this year it's $20.5 million that can be shared with the athletes at each school. Another key part of it, there's a lot of nuances, but no roster limits. So that was a big hang-up because it used to be football. Football rules everything. There were 85 player roster limits, and and people saw this and going, well, if there's roster limits, then a lot of people don't get a share in this. So a lot of athletes have been grandfathered in. There's no limit to the scholarships that players they can have on scholarship. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have it unlimited because that costs the school a lot of money. And we're talking about football here, but all other sports, there's no roster limits. Another thing that I think people wondered about, well, wait a minute, if the schools are going to be paying these athletes directly, what happens to NIL? Well, NIL is still in place. Athletes can go out and they can still sign NIL deals and make a bunch of money, and there's the collectives with schools that can set up these NIL deals for players. One thing that was part of the settlement was that if there's any NIL deal that is over $600, that's really low. So essentially all NIL deals will be subject to an audit by Deloitte, the consulting firm that will look at this and see if these are legitimate deals, that they're not kind of trying to weasel their way around those. Those are the main things. But so now that we have it, you say congratulations. We're going to be talking about the House settlement because, there are going to be appeals. There are going to be objectors. Some of the things that are going to happen is potential, we'll talk about it in the next story, Title IX challenges, potentially legislation where legislators try to get a handle on some of this stuff. So it's just not, we've talked about it being the Wild West. And I think one thing that has kind of, not just NIL, but the transfer portal has really made it really difficult to really, have a handle on all of this because players jumping from school to school, even mid-season, leaving teams, and that makes it real tough for schools. So there might be some legislation in place, but right now it's a signed deal and the House is in place. It's the new law, but it may not be able to be totally in place till some of these issues are hammered out.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
Well, something that I don't see talked a lot about is where does this money going to come from, right? This $20.5 million, and I'm just bringing up a quote that this was from the Alabama athletic director who testified before Congress, and I'm talking about the $20.5 million that each school can start using to pay their athletes. So the Alabama AD testifies before Congress and says those are resources and revenues that don't exist, and so I don't know. I mean, obviously it's going to come from, growing TV rights packages, especially from the college football playoff. But it'll be interesting to see what some schools do as far as increasing cost to fans, concession price hikes, athletic fees to tuition costs. I'm not totally sure, but it's going to be interesting to see how the, paying for this plays out.
So do you want to move over to the space where the female athletes appeal this settlement, saying it violates federal anti-discrimination? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Apparently there could be some Title IX implications. Go ahead.
I think we can hit that real quick, Spence. But basically there's 8 female athletes that have filed an appeal with the House lawsuit. And this is really only regarding the back pay, right? Whatever it is, $7 billion in back pay that would go to athletes, pre-House right now. And so they have been objecting all along. These are formal objectors that have been making objections throughout this settlement process before Judge Wilkins. And they're saying that this is really skewed heavily, of course, in favor of men's football and men's basketball. And that the female athletes are just going to get a small share of this, and that violates Title IX. So, on the plaintiff side of this, the main underlying plaintiffs, I mean, what they've argued is they said, hey, no, this has been addressed time and time again by Judge Wilkins. She says it wasn't a problem, signed off on the settlement. And what Judge Wilkins had said about it had said, well, this is an antitrust case. And we're settling it on that basis. That's what the underlying claims are. This is not a Title IX case. But I think what these 8 women who are appealing, what they're saying is that really the Title IX implication comes in how the settlement is implemented. So what's going to happen, though? The immediate thing, it's going to hold up payments. This appeal will hold up back payments for now, probably for several months to any of the other players. Any of the back payments.
Preston, you have a thought on this? You want to move over to my guy?
Okay. Just a couple things. It's really interesting. There's been speculation how the money will be split. This money, and at 75% of the football programs, 15% of the men's basketball, 5% to women's basketball, and a measly 5% to be split between all the other sports. And what's ironic about this? Guess what? Our guy House was a swimmer for Arizona State University. The guy who started this whole thing, he was a swimmer.
That's right.
And so not a lot of justice for the swimmers out there.
All right, moving over to my guy Oak, and actually Johnny Mack is my guy as well. So it's the 9th year of this assault and battery lawsuit that Oak filed after he was removed from MSG. And it looks like they're trying to get Johnny Mack to take the stand. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's exactly right. That's why it caught my attention. A side note, I'd love to hear some of your Oakley stories. You running around MSG when you were a young kid.
For sure.
I bet you got some good ones.
Yep.
But we've covered this. It's hard to believe we're in the 8th or 9th year of this. And this grows out of a situation that a basketball game at MSG one night, and Oakley's there, and there's a history between Oakley and Dolan, and apparently he had been, he was allegedly making a fuss, and MSG security came and asked him to leave, and he was escorted, and it turned into a little bit of a scuffle. Well, as a result of this, Oakley sued MSG and Dolan, alleging assault, false arrest, torts, civil torts, all kinds of things, and this has been going back and forth for a long time, and Oakley has lost a lot of these. He's kind of stayed in the game, gets reinstated. Well, the last thing that's happened right now is that MSG has come forward and said, okay, now we have enough evidence to make a decision, and they filed what's called a motion for summary judgment. And this is the thing that lawsuits use, and the standard for a summary judgment is, hey, there are no disputed facts. We can agree on all the facts. This can be decided by the court as a matter of law, and we can move on. This will be dismissed if the court grants it. And what they've said that the case has been fully developed. There's a record of thousands of pages, numerous videos, incidents, different angles, direct eyewitnesses that kind of support MSG's position. And one of them is our guy McEnroe, who I like McEnroe a lot. Apparently, he was a guest that night at the game with none other than Dolan. And so he has been, as a witness, dragged in to testify about this, and he has set forth a statement that said, hey, I don't want to pick sides on this. I don't have a dog in the fight. But he essentially testified that Oakley came out with Oakley yelled and was kind of, abrasive with security. They asked him to leave, and they can do that. They, these places can ask people to leave. You're not a guest there. And he yelled at him. He says, you're a blanking snitch and blank you. I'm not leaving. And that was essentially the part of it. So what they're relying on here is that all of Oakley's allegations that he was being peaceful and that, he got roughed up. There was even an allegation that he was pushed down. He slipped and fell because of the stuff that was going on. Their position and what they hope is going to happen here is that it kind of shows that Oakley wasn't right here. His allegations, and I kind of doubt the court will dismiss it based on that, but that's what they're relying on. John McEnroe has already been brought in as a deposition witness, and he might, at some point, if it goes to trial, be called to testify at trial.
All right, Garrett, you're up, bud.
I really don't have anything else I can add on
okay.
this story that I haven't over the years.
Okay, fair enough. New details have emerged in the Tyler Skaggs civil case. We also covered this once upon a time. It's been a minute, so let's get an update.
Yeah, this is kind of a sad story. Tyler Skaggs, he was a pitcher for the Angels and died of an overdose in 2019. It was a prescription painkiller type overdose, Percocet. Had a long-standing problem. And there's new information coming out of this. But a little more on the backstory. There was a communications director for the team. His name was Eric Kay. And he was implicated in this criminally, that really he was the supplier of the drugs to Tyler Skaggs and was sentenced to 22 years in prison.
And so that took place, and then after that, the Skaggs family, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Angels organization, and their argument basically is that the Angels knew about Tyler's drug addiction and didn't do anything about it, and that they knew in particular that this Eric K. was supplying the drugs to him. And so fast forward now, that case was filed in 2019, this wrongful death case, and now what's happened, there's been some recent filings in The Athletic. They were watching this pretty closely, and some of those, there's some deposition transcripts that were filed, and usually those would be under seal in this case, but I don't know, some kind of glitch with maybe the court filing system, and they were not under seal, and so a lot of these depositions have been reported, and some of the information that came out is that some of the pills that were supplied to Tyler Skaggs were from Wade Miley. He's a current pitcher with the Reds. And so as a result of some of this information and some other messages between the family, in particular, that the Angels organization and Skaggs' agent, that they let the Skaggs family know about Tyler's drug addiction. So they're saying, hey, you guys knew about this. And so what they've done now, the Angels on May 30th, they filed a motion for summary judgment. Of course, they're looking to get out of this. They've claimed the Skaggs family, it's a $200 million wrongful death case, so they are looking to get out of it if they can.
All right, Preston, what do you got?
Not much more, other than I see that they're claiming huge damages. They're essentially saying that he had a big earning potential, and you got to prove your damages. But if he'd been able to pitch for years and years, it could have been in the tens and tens and tens and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. And I see here that there was another motions for summary judgment. You see that a lot in cases. We just kind of talked about it in the Oakley case.
All right, final one for today. It is U.S. Open week, so we'll bring on a golf story. And every time I read that Jack Nicklaus himself was suing his own company, I just like, what's going on here? But we've talked about this before, but it is ongoing. It's a defamation lawsuit filed by Jack. So fill us in before we let you go for a Thursday.
Yeah, the backstory of this was, Jack had sold his company to, something that was named the Nicklaus Company because they love to use his name, and he actually at one point sold his interest in it. And what he didn't sell, in his opinion, was the ability to use his name, image, and likeness. And that was the bigger part of the lawsuit. But and he actually won that side of it, that he was able to continue to use his name, image, likeness, just because he sold the rights to his company to, probably golf course design and Nicklaus Apparel and Golden Bear and stuff like that. He didn't give up his right to use his name, image, and likeness. Well, during this litigation, the company, the Nicklaus companies, they made a statement that they claimed that they saved him from proceeding with a business relationship with the Gulf and the Saudis and the Live Golf. And, there's a lot of controversy surrounding that. So Jack didn't take kindly to that, and he said, wait a minute, you didn't save me. I was never going to enter into an agreement with them. I didn't support that. I wasn't going to go in. That makes me look bad if you did that. And so what he did is he sued for defamation. And we've talked about defamation a number of times. The standard for defamation is you have to prove, number one, that a written or verbal statement was made that was actually false and that it caused damage. And in a public figure case, you have to show actual malice. So he's got a pending defamation case going. And the issue that's going on, the legal issue right there now, is the Nicklaus companies, he filed it in Florida. I guess he thought that was a kinder forum. This is a jurisdictional kind of forum dispute that's going on right now where the court, the Nicklaus company said, well, wait a minute. This was signed as part of this agreement was that we agreed on a forum in New York, and we want to be in New York. And the trial court said, no, Jack can remain in Florida because we don't think there's really a connection between his defamation claim and the LLC, the agreement, the partnership there. And they appealed it, and Jack won and got to stay in Florida. And the Nicklaus companies appealed that, and the Court of Appeals came back, and they agreed with the lower court and said, yeah, there was no nexus. That's a legal term that they love to use, that there's no nexus between the defamation claim and the Nicklaus company's LLC forum agreement. So Jack's continuing with his lawsuit, and he gets to do it where he wants to.
All right, Garrett, what do you got here, bud?
I don't. I think Preston covered it pretty well.
All right, good stuff. Before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yes, Spence, we'd love to hear from anyone out there. Talk to you about your legal issues, especially if you have a personal injury case that we specialize in. Give us a call at 801-264-6677 or jump on our website at handylawutah.com. You can learn about us and submit your questions there.
Always fun, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the time. Have a great weekend, and as always, go Utes.
Go Utes. Thanks, Spence.
All right, Preston and Garrett Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. We'll launch into the final hour of the program, which features Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune to talk some Jazz off season and some NBA finals. And of course, Edmonton is trying to tie it up tonight, and we'll have game 4 of the Stanley Cup final between the Oilers and the Panthers. But before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Bottom line, you guys know the number. Call it if you haven't by now, because you can save a grip of money by picking up your cell phone and dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
You definitely can. And, guys, this is an opportunity you don't want to miss. Dish has got that great 2-year promotion, right? It's 2 years. Price is guaranteed. You get credits, big credits, and this is substantial. This is you'll be spending $30, $60 a month less than what you're paying, especially with cable and DirecTV. It's easy to make the switch. We'll come out and take care of everything. But how about this? Make it a little better. We're going to throw in 3 months free. This is an awesome deal. I'm super excited we have this with Dish. So you get 3 months of service for free, and this will equate to you not just saving a little bit of money, but we're talking thousands. Call us up and upgrade. Get the biggest, fastest DVR. We also can help with internet. I got packages starting in the $20 a month. If from there, and I've got a half a dozen different internet providers. So if you're unhappy with your current internet, it's glitchy, it goes out all the time. I know we hear about that with cable a lot. Call us and let's switch you over. We got some great tricks where you don't have to mess with all your Wi-Fi. It'll all work. All your devices will work. Super simple. We can come and get you set up. 424-DISH is the number. Call us now, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it Drive at 5 time. We're looking at a Thursday afternoon, about 8 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, final hour of the program. Before we say goodnight for a little Stanley Cup final, we'll see if Edmonton can even it up. Florida with an emphatic statement in Game 3, smoking the Oilers 6-1. And that game will come your way right after we say goodnight, about 50 minutes from right now. The NBA Finals resume tomorrow with Game 4 in Indianapolis after the Pacers were able to, quite frankly, stun most people that cover NBA basketball by winning Game 3 at home, taking a 2-1 lead at Gainsbridge Fieldhouse, 116-107. That game tomorrow night will be at 6:30 Mountain Time and can also be heard on our radio station. We are your home of both the NBA Finals and the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup. So make sure to stay tuned for that. The U.S. Open is taking place right now for you golf fans. It is the third major golf championship of the year. Oakmont Country Club has brought several of the world's best golfers to their knees, as we thought it might, including our local players, Tony Finau, Zach Blair, Preston Summerhays. J.J. Spahn continues to lead the tournament. He carded a 66. Tristan Lawrence is at 3 under par. Siwoo Kim. Brooks Koepka finished strong, 2 under par. He's tied for 4th. John Rahm, Cam Young among the notables at 1 under par. Jordan Spieth finished even. So did Colin Morikawa and Patrick Reed. Patrick Reed actually had an albatross, a 2 on a 5, which never happens. As far as our local players, it just has been a tough go for Tony, man. And with the Ryder Cup not too far away, he's got to figure something out. Zach Blair carded a 74. He's at 4 over par. Last I checked, Tony was at 6 over, but I'm scrolling down and I do not see him, which is not good news. Preston Summerhays, Tony's 7 over par through 16. Preston Summerhays, excuse me, he's in the clubhouse now at 8 over. Oof. Rough finish for Preston. Tony's got 2 holes left. Some of the best golfers in the world have just found this challenge impossible. It is the hardest challenge in golf. Justin Thomas, 6 over par. Among the notables that have not played well at all. So it's only round 1, but we had Cam Rogers on earlier, and I believe he said 26 of the past 28 U.S. Open champs were within 4 shots of the lead after 1 round. And so if we cap that at even par, that eliminates a lot of some of the best golfers in the entire world, including Xander Schauffele. Sam Burns struggled to finish his round. Keegan Bradley, Bryson DeChambeau, 3 over. Scotty Scheffler finished at 3 over, and Rory McIlroy finished at 4 over par, as did Wyndham Clark. So tough round 1 for some of these golfers. We learned yesterday, right after this came out this morning. University of Utah basketball schedule has been announced. We know the Big 12 conference opponents for the Utes. Alex Jensen's first year at the helm as he enters Big 12 play. It'll be year 2 for Utah in Big 12 play. It's an 18-game league schedule. As far as the home and away is what I should say. Utah will play Arizona State, BYU, and Colorado here in Salt Lake and also in their building. The other home contests will be Arizona. That's awesome. Houston. That's great. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU, and UCF. And the road contest will be Baylor, Cincinnati, Kansas, K-State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. So there you go. We'll catch a quick break. We're going to bring in Andy Larson coming up on the other side. We're just a couple of weeks away from the NBA draft, where the Jazz find themselves at 5-21. And the latest on the conversation surrounding Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. Are the Jazz actually serious about taking calls? And then Andy's thoughts on the NBA Finals. Can the Pacers actually do this? Vegas still likes Oklahoma City, and honestly, I'm still leaning that way. Now, I picked OKC in 5. That will not happen. But if they can just grab 1, it's best 2 of 3, and they have Game 7 in their building. So we'll bring in Andy coming up on the other side. Then we'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock and send you over to live coverage of the Oilers-Panthers Game 4, busy final hour of the show on a Thursday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, programming note coming up on the other side. It is time for Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. Florida leads that series 2-1 after a dominating Game 3 in which they smoked the Edmonton Oilers 6-1. So there you go. That comes your way next. NBA Finals resume tomorrow, and we'll have Game 4 of that series on the station as well. Indiana takes a 2-1 lead after a win last night. Before we catch a break to make way for Stanley Cup playoffs, got to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products, where you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local company, been around for decades. This is Nate Orchard, mayor of Sac Lake City. His buddy Jake Weber and their families, they have operated this forever. As the weather gets warmer, and it has been hot this week, if your house is very warm and you have to jack up that air conditioning, you're just hemorrhaging money. So you might want to get those windows replaced. Or if you plan on getting them replaced, even in the fall, if you might sell your home, if you call today, get on the schedule, you lock in massive savings. They've got great warranties, lifetime warranties, transferable to a new homeowner. Advanced Window Products, the number is 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or visit advancedwindows.com. All right, Porter, before we say goodnight, bottom line this. Do you believe the Indiana Pacers can actually win the NBA championship?
Absolutely. Now, yes. And not to say that I was one who, had any hot takes about them winning it before the series, but I did tell you that with a certain formula, they absolutely could make it interesting just because of what I think to be a really deep and interesting kind of cast of characters that you can throw at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder. And once you go up 2-0, man, or once you go up 2-1, yeah, absolutely you have a shot. Now, I was a little surprised to see lines from Vegas still, despite a 2-1 lead, it gives OKC a pretty fair, favorite marking. And that to me is interesting. For me now, the script has already been flipped. Regardless of what Vegas says or, around the country, I think that the lead foot is now with Indiana and not with Oklahoma City. When you go up 2-1, that's kind of the cards you hold. And yeah, man, they absolutely can win this series. I mean, you go in and you have a hot field goal shooting night in Oklahoma City. You go up 3-1, this thing's almost over. Still, better roster, I think, probably on the OKC side, but they now have to statistically win more games than their opponent to take home an NBA Finals. I think Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers now have a better opportunity to win an NBA title than OKC does.
17 fast break points last night. They had 19 fast break points combined in games 1 and games 2. They get out and run. They're hard, man. They really are. All right, coming up next, Stanley Cup playoffs, Stanley Cup final, Game 4. Porter, what comes our way on a Friday edition of The Drive?
On a Friday edition of the program, Tony Jones stops by, some NBA Jazz chatter on the show, NBA Daily Assist with our guy Dave McMenamin. We'll do some U.S. Open, PGA Tour talk with our guy Paul Pugmire, and back to old times. Chris Comrani's available on a Friday to end the show and to end the week.
Look at that. That'll be a fun Friday show, so join us for that. And with that, we will say goodnight. And a special thank you to Andy Larson, Howard Beck, Cam Rogers, and Matt Brown for any of the sound you may miss from the show today. Go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It actually does help. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a great Thursday evening. Enjoy a little Stanley Cup final. Coming up on the other side, we'll talk to you tomorrow right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.